All right. Well, welcome to stream number 2 on the Raw Real Adoptee Words
Number
podcast,
2.
or live stream or whatever. I'm your host, Adam, with my co host, Kyle, and our special
Hey,
guests for today,
straight
Teen
from
and
Escape from
Philip.
Plan A.
That's
What's up,
right.
fellas?
How's it
So,
going?
if you guys are familiar or coming or listeners of Escape from Plan A, we've had a few episodes where we talk about being wife guys. So, this is the wife guy crew. And we decided that we'd just come and do it on the stream. So welcome, Teen and Philip.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Hey, good to have you guys. We're feeling great because you're here. So, I'm ready.
All right.
This time we don't have like a rigid outline, no scripts, nothing. This is just straight off the dome.
Kyle,
So-
are you typically like the winter beanie guy? You got the beanie going a lot? I like it.
So I would say lately, yes. And it's because, since I'm still having some residual muscle pain, like I decided I'm just going to have like a low maintenance haircut. And I don't like the low maintenance haircut enough to like not have the hat. So I've been wearing hats a lot lately to
Okay.
complement
You're
my
lazy,
style.
but you're also a little bit vain. So you're like, I gotta.
No, exactly. Like I am like not caring enough to the point where I'm willing to make a sacrifice with my hair, but I need to wear the hat to feel like I can be presentable in public. So that's about where it's at right now.
Okay.
And actually, in the meantime, I'm just gonna post this live on Twitter so other people can join in.
That's right.
Sounds good.
Why am I so gray and dark compared to you guys? I need better lighting in here.
Yeah, I think you
I
need
think
better
it's the
lighting.
lighting, man.
Your
My
lights
lighting
on?
sucks.
Okay.
Do you have any lights on in the room right now, or?
No, yeah, I do.
Just
but
ambient.
it's just weak.
Yeah, it is weak.
Yeah.
It is gray.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nothing I can do about that at the moment.
All right, so grabbing that link and I'll be pasting it.
Sweet. Yeah.
You know
so
what? Maybe if I could turn my
Nothing I can do about that.
monitor background to white.
All right.
Like,
that might help,
like,
right?
get a little
the glow of
fluorescent
the,
light.
of the monitor.
Yeah, let me see if that works actually. Let's see.
It's just gonna make your glasses look terrible. Trust me, I've tried it.
Really?
Oh, try it.
So we wanted like the main theme here, I think, if we had a theme for this, was to talk about having kids, right? So like, do we want to have kids? If we were to have kids, how would we raise them? And I guess the impetus for this is, Philip, I'll let you make the announcement to the world.
Sure,
here.
yeah.
It's very weird that this went from like a just another EFPA podcast to like a live stream. So I'm announcing it live on YouTube or whatever. But my wife is pregnant. We're expecting a kid later next year in April. So that's the big news.
Awesome. Love it.
Were you just setting up Kyle to do the sound?
Yeah,
Is that what-
pretty
okay.
much.
Okay.
Exactly.
We needed the air horn, but anyway, congrats, man. I mean,
Thank
That's
you.
awesome
Let's
news.
get some applause in there too.
Yeah, let me see here. Do I have applause? No,
Is
I
it?
don't.
It's just an air horn. That's all it is.
No, I've got
The
plenty
air
of other
horn is
stuff.
it's the
Man,
modern day
play me
applause.
anything
right?
with the air horn, man.
I
You
got like
an
the Doom
elephant?
pistol. I've got man getting hit by football. I've got the Homer Simpson scream.
That's
All of
that's
these
one
are
reaction.
all of these are
That's
appropriate
one reaction,
reactions.
yeah.
to
Yeah,
you
exactly.
that you're having
There's
to do.
GTA 5 wasted.
That's also appropriate.
Nice.
But
Awesome.
yeah.
that is a specific sound, the GTA 5 one. But
You know what
anyway,
happened when you hear that?
yeah. So I mean, just amazing news. And as
Was this planned?
What, the
They
soundboard
married.
or the baby?
Yeah, the sound, the baby. Was this something that you guys had, like, you and your wife had planned on for a while, or was this a happy
Yeah.
accident? Or
No, not an accident. It was definitely planned.
Yeah.
Happened very quickly after we started trying to make it happen. So that's good.
Mhm.
And of course, there's the usual period of time when you just like don't tell anybody because it's like the
Yeah.
first trimester, risky, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I
I actually learned that the hard way because one time I heard the news that someone was pregnant or they were expecting, and it turns out
Yep.
they lost it. So I learned the hard way. You gotta like keep that quiet for like the
Yeah.
first trimester or so to make sure that
That's
things are
right.
good. So don't make the same mistake that I did. Just wait for the time to be right.
Yeah.
And don't
Which they
announce it on
did.
behalf of other people, because
Yeah, I mean,
bad
definitely
things
don't do
can
that.
happen.
Yeah.
Well, how did
So-
you? But how did you end up knowing, Kyle? Before
Oh, were you on right when Philip joined? Because basically, I just found out by Adam saying it in passing. So I was just like, "Whoa, this is the first time I'm hearing it." So
No. I'm
I
saying
thought you meant that
I'm
your
saying
friend-
like when you found out about some other person's pregnancy, but then they lost it. You're saying you knew before they told you before the sort of like first trimester mark, and then
yeah,
you
exactly.
blabbed about it.
Yeah, I blabbed about it. That was my mistake. It was one of those things where I'm bad at keeping
Oh, man.
secrets, especially if I interpret it to be good news at first. Then I started telling people,
Mm.
don't do that. So that's a
Yeah.
life lesson that I learned. So
I see.
yes,
Yeah. I mean, it's all very precarious, right? The whole,
Absolutely.
pregnancy thing, for more reason just like the physical, like biological things I just described, but also, all the reasons people give today to not have kids, that you have to kind of wrestle with up until you decide to do it, right? Climate change is a big thing. that people cite
How
all the
old are
time
you
now.
again, Philip?
35.
35.
Yeah. Yeah, and mine was the same age. So like we're also further along in age, and so it becomes way riskier. I think 34, 35 is
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
cutoff point, not cutoff point, but like it's the kind of like the risk starts there, right? But at the same time, there's also this big trend where people are having and deciding to have kids way later when they do.
Way late, man.
Way later.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
35
Absolutely.
to me sounds like pretty on target these days. Whereas, like, I have friends that have 1-year-old kids, and I'm 40. We're 44 this year.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that seems like the average age for first child has crept up and up and up and up. Like it seems like every year from like the 90s, right? Like
I think it's
whenever they
scaled
started-
pretty much directly with like the loss of economic opportunity for people around my age. So I think starting around, around your guys' age, and definitely sort of into my generation about 10 years later, no one's having kids. Like I know like 20 married couples, and I know maybe 1 or 2 couples that are either expecting or have kids. So it's it's tough out there, man. And the cost of childcare is only going up too. So
You know what makes it tough living in a city like New York? It does not encourage you to have kids.
oh, I
I'm
bet.
sure Toronto is not. I think it's like probably one of the worst cities in terms of like real estate prices to income ratios. And
Yeah,
so to
it's-
get like a good starter home is really tough. I know you guys have locked down a house, which is great, but not everyone's going to be able to afford that.
Yeah, and we have this big issue here where a lot of people who are, at a ripe age for kids, mid-20s to, mid-30s, that range, right? They're
Right.
still living in Toronto, like in a condo or, an apartment, and it's a bit tougher. And the part of the issue is that we don't build like 2-bedroom condos here. We only build like 1-bedroom shoeboxes, right? With like
Yeah.
plus a den, which you can kind
Dang.
of barely make into a nursery. So it is hard, and people make it work. I think a lot of people like shortly after I announced our pregnancy, my friend Alex did as well, and he lives in a condo still, and he doesn't have plans to move out just yet. And it's tough. Like he's just gonna have to deal with it in a condo or a small apartment. And I have other friends who've done that too. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
economic situation is definitely a factor, and you can imagine that right now with like the downturn and all the shit that's happening, that it's it makes you nervous to have a kid come next year when it's gonna be a bit of a tough time. What if there's layoffs, right? Like what if that
True.
happens?
Yeah.
So, but that's always, I think that's always going on. I think one thing that I thought of when you guys were talking about age, like having kids at a later age, the youngest guy I knew who had a kid was a friend I made when I was an intern in Seattle. He was from BC. I was from Toronto. We met at Microsoft. We were interns in Seattle, and I remember we were like 21 at the time, and then a couple years later, 23, he announced that he and his wife had their first kid.
Wow.
At 23. And
Wow,
that was, like,
okay.
At that point, it was like 2010 or 2020, whatever, right? Like that was kind of that's pretty early. And I think maybe one factor is he was very religious. He's very
Okay.
Christian.
Is he
and I
Mormon?
think- no, he's Christian.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
straight up, like yeah.
Yeah, but still,
They tend
to do
Asian
things
guy
a little
actually,
earlier.
Chinese guy from
Catholic or Protestant?
I think Protestant. I think
Okay.
so. Chinese guy from Vancouver, originally from Calgary. One of the most charismatic Asian guys I've met up to that point in my life. Like super outgoing, was always starting shit. Like I think we all had a lot of gravity towards him because of that. And he had kids, and then we talked a little bit about why he had kids and why. And I kind of asked him like, hey, it seems kind of early. Like a lot of people don't have kids that young, right? You know. And he said, you know, I don't. Basically, he said like, I don't want to be like 40 and throwing the ball around with my kid.
Yeah.
Right? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mhm.
And like I was like, yeah, I get
40
that.
Dude, that's
so
you'd
normal
be,
now, though.
You'd be in good shape if you're throwing a ball around.
That's right.
I got friends that
Your
are changing
rotator cuff
diapers
works
at
at
40.
40.
That's what he's saying, right? And so I don't know. I thought that rationale kind of made sense, so it didn't apply to me, and I didn't really, you know. But I sometimes I think about that. I think about like by the time my kid is at the age where he or she is throwing a ball around, what is that like?
7 or 8.
7, 8,
Yeah,
whatever,
7,
right?
8.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be in like
Actually, maybe you live in a little
40s.
older. I don't know if you'd actually play a full. You'd watch them throw. I don't know if you'd go outside and play catch with them. You know, like with a baseball and glove.
It's possible, but yeah, maybe that's a little young. Maybe 10.
Yeah, probably 10.
I'd give younger kids credit. I mean, I'd say as early as 6.
Well, you
5 and
can.
younger,
You think a
Yeah,
6-year-old
you're not
can wear a baseball glove and throw a baseball properly?
a kid-sized glove? Absolutely.
My 6-year-old
That's a
niece is
pretty
not-
advanced 6-year-old, man.
Not throwing a ball
Yeah,
around.
no,
I just think your bar is set too low for children.
I don't. Have you seen kids these days, man?
Well, I mean, I'll say this.
They're
say this.
idiots.
Kids these
Yep.
days, like in comparison to the capability level that I was familiar with when I was a kid,
It's gone
definitely
way
lower.
down. What is
Gone
going
way-
on?
Yo, because like on Arthur, the show on PBS, Anthropomorphic Animals, celebrated its 25th anniversary this past year.
what animals are they? Are they like possums?
Arthur's an
or shrews or
aardvark.
something?
Aardvark? Yeah, bears, monkeys,
Okay.
Bunnies,
etc.
famously, Buster.
But
Arthur's an
it's-
aardvark.
but basically, like it's like Seinfeld for kids, and they're doing these very independent, autonomous things, like biking to the library by themselves, and they're as young as like 4 years old, like DW.
Biking
and
to the light. What do you
Philippines.
think? It's 1972. You live in a Richard Scarry book. Come on.
No, I mean, but
You bike alone to the library, you're gonna get arrested.
No, exactly. So that was the standard
allowed
that was
anymore.
set for me, like when I was a kid, and like I'm meeting like 6th and 7th graders when I've worked with kids that like can't write a paragraph yet, and I'm like, damn, the bar really has gone down.
I think
I was writing these little
the
books
last
when I
few
was in
years
school,
have been
yeah.
especially disastrous.
Oh, I
yeah.
bet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
they've been
bet.
bad.
It's like kids, they're full on like 50, like in San Francisco, it's like 50% of kids are chronically truant.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, people have just given up on school. They've given up on the kids. It's kind of fucking
It's kind of
terrible.
gross. It's
Man.
really bad.
Yeah.
Um,
The
Well, I
stats
guess
are
we'll see
much
what happens
worse.
in a
The
few
stats
years.
are really bad, man.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's an uphill climb.
Yeah. I mean, as much as like my kid's gonna come during probably a rough time economically, I'm pretty glad they weren't like kids
Okay,
in
just right in the
school
middle of
during the because I
Yeah.
can't even imagine how fucking hard. Imagine trying to get a bunch of fucking kindergartners to like pay attention to an iPad or a laptop, right, for 8 hours.
Oh my god. Can't even get people to pay attention for 30 minutes in a meeting with grown adults.
Yeah,
So,
it's
oh,
really
man.
hard. Well, let me ask you guys this question, right? Like, have you guys spent a lot of time with kids? I know, Teen, you have like 2 nephews, I think, but they're like they're like teenagers.
They're
right?
high school age now.
High school
No,
kids, yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have.
You
yeah.
have Adam? Yeah.
Yeah, probably the most of anyone here.
Like
I'd
younger
say, outside
kids?
of like family. Yeah, because I do mentorship, right? So like
Oh,
once a
true.
month.
How old are the kids?
I'm with the youth, so the youth can be from like 7, 8 up to like maybe 11, 12, and then they go to the teen
Wow.
program.
You're fucking full of energy, man. That's my nightmare.
Honestly, we have
I hate that
the
age.
9, 10-year-olds. They're actually really great. We
To you,
yeah to
you
me.
have because you have tolerance for that shit. I check out until they hit. Like I don't mess with kids and stuff until they're like young adults that can carry a proper conversation.
I hear you.
So you don't
I
dumb
hear ya.
yourself down for the kids, Teen. You wait until they're ready.
I mean,
to
unless
engage
they're
with
like really young, and then I don't even think of them as really human.
you. They're just there in the room, and sometimes they need to be.
It's like,
entertained
face
now
it, they're like animals. They're like cute little animals, right?
It's true.
And then you treat them like dogs or cats, and then
You
they
do
hit
hurt-
this
you do
weird
hurt them.
middle region where
Yeah.
they're kind of like you can't. That's not really appropriate. They are people, but they're complete idiots, morons.
Oh no,
And
yeah,
super energetic. I mean, like,
Oh my
super
god,
energetic.
yeah.
they want to. They basically have no sense of like danger. Most of them, right? Like they just run around and like get into trouble and want to climb all over everything. And I kind of find that to be just natural. And you spend your time just wrangling them, right? Just trying to keep them from running away
And you
too far
volunteer to do
away.
this.
And yeah, I do it
It's
because
incredible. But then let me ask you
Unpaid.
this question. But let me
Yeah.
ask you this question: Why don't you have one of your own? Have you ever thought about why, whether it's different playing with someone else's kid versus raising your own? Or
Yeah, it's no, there are a lot of I think societal factors, and I think I'd be a good parent, and I think I'd enjoy it, and I think I wouldn't, some people resent the idea that they're gonna have to give up some things or do all these things that a parent does. I don't think I'd feel that, but I don't know. For some reason, maybe it's the adoption thing, maybe it's something else that I haven't explored yet, but I just haven't. We just haven't done it. We just haven't made the decision to do it.
But you haven't made the decision not to do it.
No, we have not. No, it's not precluded for sure. What I have precluded is that I will not participate in the adoption system by adopting. Right. I would, me personally, I would foster, but that is a whole other can of worms, and
Sure.
it's a completely different experience and mindset than either trying for your own own child or going in thinking you're going to adopt a child.
Let me ask you this question, Adam. If
Yeah.
I had come to you and I said we were thinking about adopting a kid, what would your response to me be?
I would have been a little angry.
Okay.
I would have tried to discourage you.
Wait,
from-
Adam.
It's not
Adam
extreme.
only. Are you assuming because he meant international adoption, or what if it was a domestic adoption?
even domestically,
Even
because
domestic.
I'm very, very. I mean, to the point of almost not thinking. I'm almost to the point of thinking. That 99.999% of adoptions aren't necessary.
Yeah. And-
You can use your resources and money to try to keep families together. So that's sort of my perspective on that. There are probably some cases where it's necessary, but I don't know. I'm probably on the extreme side of I wouldn't, I would want the family to be kept together almost at any cost. Not at any cost, but at every avenue exhausted.
I'm kind of with you on that, Adam, but from a different perspective, because I'm like,
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, as someone that isn't experienced with adoption directly in your own personal life, what sort of informed your opinion on that?
because I've heard people say that before, and it makes me feel like that they're doing it to satisfy their own needs. And I'm like, it's weird to think that you could just be like, okay, well then let's just go get a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm like, this feels a lot like you're lonely, or you're missing something in your life, and it would help your life if some baby would walk into it.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yo, that's supremely selfish. Have you thought about not doing anything and just living your life as is, and maybe trying to make that
getting
work?
a cat or a dog.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and I want to make this contentious because I think Philip is outnumbered here. And it's rare. It's rare because in normal life, Philip, I'm way outnumbered by parents.
Oh,
I'm
your normie friends is yours.
Yeah, in my normie life, I'm like
Yeah.
the lone holdout, right? And I'm not antinatalist at all. I think I think families are great, and I think my friends who are parents are fucking heroes, like, to do what they do, because it's a lot. However, I think there is an aspect to parenting these days where it is markedly different than say our parents' generation. And I'm not saying that they're
Absolutely.
necessarily the example to follow, okay? But it is different where I think people are having children to complete their own lives versus we fucked around a little, she got pregnant, we had it, and then that's that. And then, they just raised the kids. Where the kids were like sort of happy accidents, or they got married and were like, fuck it, this is what you do, you just have kids. Now I feel like I'm seeing people wait until really late in life, like 40 plus, to have a kid because they suddenly have some fucking midlife crisis of meaning, and the kid's there to solve that crisis for them. And that's the same whether it's adoption or birth. You're still making a human being a solution to your own problems, and I just find that inherently problematic.
You're just describing this as a dichotomy, like it's not a spectrum of possibilities. You're saying either people want to have kids because they're trying to find meaning for themselves, or they accidentally had a kid. Because there's other reasons why people have kids. Like there's other,
No, but I think there's a range.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mix.
Yeah.
And I certainly have friends that were sort of like, I don't know, maybe we'll have them if we have them. I don't know. And they had kids.
Mm-hmm.
I've had friends that were like strict antinatalist types, and then they were like, oh, fuck it, we had kids. I don't know. Fucked up.
Oops.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that to me, for me personally, this is just a very personal perspective, and parenting and attitudes towards parenting is like the most personal thing. So I'm just expressing a purely personal perspective, is that I feel more and more these days that children have become supplements to the lives of their parents, and rather than just sort of like the parents are like, oh shit, I got some kids, I got to raise them, they got their own lives. Parents are just so heavily involved in the lives of their children. And I'm monologuing, but
no, that's cool. We're keeping it raw.
Okay, that they complain so much about like, oh my god, like parenting is such a 24/7 thing, and like it just takes so much. And I'm like, it does it, or are you inserting yourself into your kid's life because you're living vicariously through their life? You're experiencing their childhood through them. And there's like this sort of like twee sort of like, I feel like parents are trying to re-experience childhood through their children.
I don't think
it's disturbing to me.
I don't think that's new. It might be more prevalent now, but I definitely remember a lot of media and movies, TV shows, articles, books, a lot of that consciousness when I was even growing up. Right, like
for sure, yeah.
It's been there.
It's been in the culture.
It's been in the culture. It might be more prevalent now. I'm not sure about that because I'm not paying attention to that type of thing.
But the thing is, I don't hear it expressed, and I think that the culture is so supportive of this idea that it's unquestioned. Okay. And you have a media a media culture that really celebrates this concept that you can sort of like relive these moments again through your children.
How does the media celebrate that? Like, what are they pushing? What ideas are they pushing that celebrates that?
Just the sense. I think there's a lot of marketing that's built around the sentimentality towards childhood, and like
as in like nostalgia.
Yeah,
nostalgia, and the sort of consumerism based around what the parents kind of wish they had, rather than what the kids had.
Yeah,
and I feel like a lot of toys that are they're just super. Like I see a lot of parents with like these like fucking Finnish built wooden blocks, and like just really high end artisanal toys, and I'm like, the kids don't care,
right?
Yeah, this is a thing that you like.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, but I guess to maybe go back a little bit with this, like Philip, like how did, and I think you were starting to talk about this, but like, what were the worries and desires that you had, obviously talking with your wife about this, and how did you guys come to the decision that this is something you really wanted to do and to go ahead and take the steps to do it? to have a kid or kids, right? Like maybe more than one.
It's a big loaded question.
Oh no, no, yeah.
And we're live.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I'll say is like it's. I mean, I thought about this recently because I knew we were going to do this episode, and I think that one thing I would say about making the decision to have kids is that it is the one most mutual decision you could make in a relationship, right? Like getting married.
Yeah.
I mean, like getting married, you can get divorced. There's some avenues out of that. Having a kid, I guess you could give up the kid. Like that's kind of a fucked up thing to do, but in reality,
yeah.
the responsible human thing to do is to raise that kid together, right? And that's a decision that you both make. And often there's situations where the man tries to get out of it in some way, right? Like either literally just leaves or like pays less attention to the child and so on. But in a responsible situation, it is the most like most important mutual decision you could make if you choose to make it, right? And not everybody chooses to make it, and that's fine, but
You're saying in life.
In life, period. Like it has that
Yeah, I would
significance.
agree.
And
Yeah.
I personally have this mindset of like really not fucking around with this child.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like I'm very serious about this fatherhood thing, right? Like
Ultimate responsibility.
not to the point
Yeah.
of obsession, but you're trying to just being like
Absolutely.
you can't fail this person. You cannot fail this person when they are born. At least for 18 years, then they can go off and do whatever the fuck they want at that
Yeah,
point.
that's their problem.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I have like my whole mindset around that is very different. I could give you an example. Like, I don't care about, I think that up to a certain point for young people, they care a lot about being not boring, as in like being interesting, like leading an interesting life, pursuing their own personal interests. A lot of that manifests in ways like consumerism, travel, like all this stuff, right? Finding weird hobbies, whatever.
Doing drugs.
Their niches.
Yeah.
I guess experimenting with all this stuff, right? For me, at the point where you know you're gonna have a kid, that stuff doesn't seem to matter anymore. Like I just deal with stuff like having a home, a mortgage, a 9-to-5 job. Like I don't sweat that it's kind of boring. I don't think it's that boring. I think I actually have a pretty interesting job, and like health stuff is like can be boring, but it's actually kind of fun to like team. We've been talking about this like building shit.
Yeah.
Like there's a separate set of life segment of your life that starts when you like start to own that responsibility, right? Maybe as an adult or as a man or whatever. And I don't sweat that anymore. When I think back to your question, Adam, about like the sacrifices that people make, the worries they have about having the child, everybody has.
Right, and I thought about that because I think in the beginning you mentioned like climate change, right? So I mean that's like a big sort of
that's
overhanging
an easy
worry,
example.
but like
people,
what,
it's very trendy, right?
Right,
to be
but was there
"Ooh."
like a more personal worry, right? Like
I mean-
maybe a quote unquote smaller worry that you had.
I'll tell you exactly what my selfish
Yeah.
worry was when I was like trying to finally make this decision with my wife to go and try and have a kid.
Yeah.
My main worry, like my main like sacrifice I knew I was going to give up was travel. Right?
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
Yep.
I really like traveling. I really enjoy it. It was a huge formative part of my throughout my 20s. I did a lot of it through work. That slowed down because of the pandemic quite a bit. But because of Plan A, because of the conversations we have, amongst ourselves and in the Discord and so on, I had a lot of aspirations to travel, especially to Asia, right? Like I've never been to Guangdong, and I really want to go because like I speak Cantonese. My family heritage from there. That was a big trip I wanted to do. Vietnam as well, where my family's from. We had a big plan we're actually going to do our honeymoon after we got married in Vietnam, like partly with my family and then split off and do our own thing for a while.
Sure,
That
yeah.
was kind of the plan. And it was very significant because like my mom and dad had not been, well, my mom went back after like a long time, but my dad had not gone. So this would be like a big family trip, right? And like all this stuff we wanted to do. And want to go out to Japan, go check out Seoul, Korea,
That's
right?
only
All this stuff.
but that's only a limitation for a few years.
Yes.
It's not, I mean,
Okay,
my friends
I mean-
travel with their babies.
Yeah, and my wife says this too. Like, it's actually very easy to travel with an infant because it's more controllable. They're not a kid running around.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah.
people around the world just love babies naturally, and so you get actually a lot of
Human beings just love babies, man.
Yeah,
They get a lot of help.
and so it's not a
Yeah.
but it look, it's harder.
It is.
okay?
Yeah. It's not just you,
Right,
and your wife.
and yeah, it's gonna you know, the way I thought about it was like, I'm not going to be able to freely travel in the same way I did in my 20s anymore until like the kid is off to college or whatever. And by then I'll be whatever, 60, right? Like it's a very different kind of travel than if you're in your 30s. So that was the main thing. And like, I very quickly got over it. I was like, it's worth it to sacrifice that and, you know, to do this thing. But that was my main concern. Like all the other stuff doesn't actually bother me that much, to be honest.
What about the financial aspect of it?
Yeah, that's
I think
pretty
for me, the biggest, I think the biggest thing. Well, I'm just not particularly interested in biological reproduction of my. I don't feel like my genes need to keep going forth. But like, I think the biggest thing for me was like, kids are fucking expensive, dude. I mean, when I compare my expense profile for a given month compared to my parent friends, it is like we are living in totally different realms. Totally different realms. I mean, my friends easily spend $10,000 to $20,000 on discretionary spending a month.
I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how that's like.
All
what?
What do you mean? What?
Serious?
I mean, that's of course.
Crazy.
You talked about this a lot in the past.
I can believe it.
You talk about how you like to like, you know, brag by showing them your credit card bill and be like, look how
I brag by showing them my credit card.
How little it is.
My credit
right?
card bill for this month is $680.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
in New York City.
Yeah, and theirs is. I have a friend. He like we were hanging out and we all pulled up our credit card bills on our cell phone and threw it on the table, and they're like, "Have a look." And I looked. I was like, $16,000. How is this?
Oh
does this
my
include your
God.
mortgage? No, doesn't include the mortgage.
Wow.
How is it 16,000? And I looked through it, and it looked like a normal credit card bill. It was just a lot more of it. It was like, you know,
Yeah. I have
unreal, dude.
I've thought about what you shared about this before, because you talked about it at length in the past, and I think you have outlier friends. Like I think that you have friends who are deep into, and you've said this yourself, right? They're deep into lifestyle creep, right? They're deep into
keeping up with the Joneses,
high expectations. Yeah, not just for themselves, but
but they don't live particularly glamorous lives. They're living, in my opinion, very normal suburban.
Really, and they're spending
upper middle class lives, but
$20K a month, like.
Yeah, I mean, if they take a vacation that month, it'll easily spike to 20 or more.
Yeah, and you know, we talked to other dads too who are like, yeah, it's expensive to have kids and so on. You know, and on a monthly basis, you need to maintain a high salary in order to fulfill whatever plans you have for your kids. My response to that, and this is very personal because of my upbringing, is that like, what about all these other fucking parents that are taking great care of their kids and they're not making half the salary you're making in your fancy tech or banking or whatever job, right? What are they doing? What about my parents? Like my parents were fucking refugees from Vietnam. They made fucking nothing. Right? And they raised me and my sister fine. Well, not fine. Like there was a lot of problems.
Well, that's my point. I think you're right in the sense. I don't think my friends are outliers.
Okay.
Ooh, let's read this thing. Sometimes I thought, maybe I'd like to have a child because I think I can parent better than I parented, but I also think that can be inherently problematic to think that because you think to prove yourself that you're a better parent.
Yeah, just to have a kid to prove that you can do better.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how but
I guess what I'm saying, Philip, is that like taking what Monica said there. I do think that idea creeps into my friends. I don't think my friends are not like Instagram people who want to show off. Well, some of them are, but they're not. They don't love just showing off. Like they're not like they don't even drive really fancy cars. Well, some do, but like for the most part, they're not ostentatious people.
Okay.
Right. But they do believe things like what they'll say. Like we'll have conversations, be like. Like growing up, like my parents never flew me to, Colorado to ski. I never had these experiences. Of course I want to give it to my kids.
Which I don't necessarily think that is a weird instinct or a weird desire.
No, it's totally normal.
I think it's completely normal, right?
Yeah,
What?
but
do
it
you want
is.
your-
What the? All right.
But it's life. It is lifestyle creep, and it is very much about giving your kids an experience that you didn't have growing up. And I think what Monica's saying is true. That you see what I'm saying? I think what she's saying there is a roundabout way of saying I want to live vicariously through my kids. I want to experience the childhood I never had by giving it to my kid.
Right. And I think
Plus
that
$20,000 credit card bills.
right. And I think there's if that's
And you
the
know what
only
pisses
reason
me
you-
off, Adam? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I just keep it. What pisses me off about this is that they're off going to France to ski. They're off going to. They fucking love skiing. Like everyone loves skiing. It's bizarre. Like skiing is the thing now.
Yep.
Maybe because
So
global
funny.
warming, they've realized it's like a limited resource or something. But
Savoring at least.
Oh yeah,
okay.
that's totally a factor. My sister-in-law, who has 2 young kids, has said give them like tons of chocolate, and she says like there may not be
won't
chocolate,
be chocolate
5
anymore.
years from now.
Wow.
Damn.
So
Gonna be stuck with Tootsie Rolls.
those are real like parental decisions being made these days for sure.
yeah, and so
That's insane.
look, I had someone. I know someone. Okay, someone very close to me is like profligate spenders from my perspective. But I'm a fucking hermit. I mean, who am I to say anything, right? But like profligate spenders, and I'm sure you guys would agree if I was to give the details. But they have the audacity to tell me, like, dude, I don't know how I'm going to afford college. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
you know,
my
like-
god.
or they'll say stuff like, look, here's the deal I made is like after college, that's it. They're going to have to swim on their own from that point on.
Like
I'm
completely
what?
cut off. Like zero. Like from.
Dude, like that's
Are
like
they white?
weirdly in a way.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that's harsher than what I grew up on.
Right.
I had
Yeah.
support continuously after college.
But it wasn't like at a huge high level, right?
No,
Like,
I mean things were not that. Yeah, but I mean I went to college for free. But like
right.
what I'm saying is I didn't at 21. I just was like, yeah, mom and dad, just go ahead and turn off the tap. I'm ready to just fly on my own now. You know. But they were saying to me like, yeah, 21, I have to turn the spigot off. Otherwise, they have to be at that point. They are so low.
Yeah, because otherwise the parents can't retire. You're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but yet at the same time, you're sitting here vacationing all over the world. Why? You need to be saving that
Yeah.
shit
Yeah.
for your kids.
As soon as people turn that switch on with the lifestyle creep, it's very difficult
It's
to
very
They
turn off.
can't fucking turn it off. And I'm
No.
telling you, dude, it is for the parents. The kids, for the most part, on vacation, iPad. I don't give a
Yeah,
shit
they
about
don't.
this.
They don't care.
The
Like,
parents are
just
experiencing
think.
this.
Yeah,
for
I mean, but
themselves.
think back to like when you went on vacation with your own family, if you were able to even do these things, right? Like, you had a good time, like just going on a road trip, right? Being with like your family and with your parents and like
Yes.
taking hikes or like I don't remember the fact that like, oh, I went to a fancy place. I just remember that I liked being maybe on the beach and with my brother and my parents and like with our close family friends. We happened to be in a nice house, but like we could have been it didn't matter. Like I don't remember the nice house. I remember that like the trip was nice.
Yeah, you
Like,
have good
I had
memories
time
of that.
yeah,
time.
I spent time on the beach, digging and burying people in the sand and throwing a beach ball around, that kind of stuff. So like I don't think any kid cares that they went to Fiji, right? Or they went, they were at the Four Seasons. Like they don't.
And if they do, it's
most
even
people don't.
worse.
Yeah, and if
the
they
kid
do,
does
then
care
they're
about
like,
it, it's
yeah,
even
yeah.
worse.
Yeah, I would add. I mean, since the topic of college came up, right? I would add one more thing, which is like on top of me personally not being worried about this because I don't give a shit about this kind of crap. The other part is that I live in Canada, and so there's two big factors here, right? One is like getting into a good school is pretty possible. Some people would debate that it's not. It's harder. It is harder now than it was when I was getting into college, but it's much more affordable than the U.S. So that worry is like
That's
I
huge.
don't think about that
it's
shit.
huge. I mean that's a
like,
big. Yeah.
The second factor is childcare. We have programs in place in Canada now to take childcare from $100 a day on average to $10 a day by 2025. So I'll get some benefit from that.
Wow.
That's
and
awesome.
that's another
Dude,
big.
like
That
$10
sounds very
a
un-American.
day. Like that's
Yeah. I have a coworker
Wow.
in the States who is has a kid coming around the same time, and she's been talking to me about this stuff, and she's like really fucking stressed out financially, right? Despite having a good tech job. And I'm like, yeah, we don't have that problem here. Like, I don't think about, healthcare, college, childcare, still expensive, getting better, right? It's just, they're just non-issues. So maybe I'm just like a bad example being Canadian.
Well, no, I mean, I think it is a good example about like there are a lot of there's a sizable population of people like you, Philip, right, in the United States, right?
Yeah.
You're around your age, probably around your salary level, and a lot of them are deciding not to have kids because we don't have those things in place where, you know, we don't have like a federal program to make childcare affordable. We we certainly do have in some states good good university or state college programs, but not every state has a decent level of that. So a lot of and healthcare, I mean that's a whole everyone knows about that.
Look, the difference is simple.
So
Canada is taking the route where they're going to socialize these costs. It's not free. It's just
it's
socialized,
not free,
right?
But it's socialized, yeah.
So everyone in the country, regardless of whether they have school-aged kids or not, are shouldering that burden collectively. Whereas in America, you do it on your own.
Right.
And that, to me, is why in America, I feel there's actually a very strong incentive to not have kids.
Well, yes,
because in America, it's very much like, look, society ain't got your back.
Right.
If you're going to have kids and you want them to go to college, they're going to have to take out a loan.
Right. Exactly.
And so they're going to service the loan. And so the incentive is, I think, swings very strongly in favor of not having kids.
Right. That was going to be my next point.
That's the signal that I'm getting from the.
I'm just quickly Googling Canada birth rate, America birth rate. Canada birth rate, according to Google, is 1.4, and America's birth rate is 1.64. So I don't know. That's but those are the numbers that Google just told me. There's also people talk about like if you're in a precarious situation, lower income, you're more likely to have kids than like more educated, wealthier folks. I don't know. That's a factor too. One thing I definitely thought about since the kid came into the picture is I live in a pretty kid-friendly neighborhood now. We like kind of purposely moved here because we knew we were gonna do a family thing at some point. We look on the streets, we look at the nearby shopping mall where a lot of kids go, and there's a lot of children. And I'm like, supposedly we're at a point where we have tons of immigration because we don't have enough birth rate to have replacement or whatever, right, to maintain future workforce or whatever.
Yeah,
how many kids would be
yeah.
How many kids would be fucking wandering around in this shopping mall if we're at that point? Like we had the 20 or 40% higher birth rate to get us to that point, right? Like that's a lot of fucking children. That's something that comes to my mind all the time. Because I feel like that, again, it's just where I am right now, like physically where I live. It feels like there's a lot of kids. People are having kids. It feels like there's a lot of young families around. But apparently it's not enough still to maintain shit.
Well, do you think that part of the reason why some of these policy changes at the national level in Canada have happened is that maybe they're like, it's too expensive, so we need to lower these costs, and that would encourage people to have kids?
I mean, if they're smart and they're really trying to address this issue, then yeah. I mean, are these things that are happening in Japan and South Korea and Italy, other places where
I think most of the world is more Canadian than it is American.
It is, yeah.
The U.S. stands pretty alone.
Pretty far on the other side of that spectrum, for sure.
Maybe, yeah.
So I don't know. It's rough. It's really rough on American families. I think if you look at what it takes to raise a family in Europe, which is weird because I think their fertility rates probably even lower than America's, or even lower than Canada's. But their welfare state's probably even stronger. So I don't know what the deal is, but it seems like if you throw money at the problem, it doesn't necessarily make people have more children. So I don't know. Maybe my fear of the financial burdens of parenthood is not really what's driving these low fertility rates.
So birth rate in Italy is 1.24. Birth rate in Spain is 1.23. So
wow. And those are not necessarily very rich countries. I mean, Italy is not a very rich country. Spain is not a very rich country.
Birth rate in Japan is 1.34, higher than Spain and Italy. But for some reason,
how much do you think the decision is actually driven by women and would-be mothers than it is men and fathers? Because I don't believe it's 50-50.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
No,
I
it's
mean,
not 50-50.
it's got to
Do
be
you
at
think
least
it's? I would
60
think
40
that it's more
favoring
the
women.
woman because the woman is the one that I
Yeah.
think has.
They're the one.
It's a bigger. It's
They're on the clock, right?
well.
Like that's the factor.
uh,
Yeah, it is a
yeah.
factor. Why is it
No.
not a
No.
factor?
It is. No. 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 It is. But I don't think that's why. I think that it's also. It's like more life changing in a way for a woman. Her body changes.
Yeah.
Like the man's just there as a witness in a way. Like a man can take whatever path he wants towards this. Whereas the woman is like, I mean, it's just a way bigger thing for a woman, I think.
Yeah, I think simply looking at maybe relative wealth levels and maybe and social safety nets
Hey
is
Jess, what's
not.
up?
Yeah, hey Jess, is not a complete way of thinking because I think that's a good question, Teen, about like the ratio of who's making the decision and maybe a better maybe an angle to look at this that would come up with like more accurate correlations would be sort of the relative. But what's the situation of women in that country? Like, what are their attitudes about wanting kids or their security levels? Right? Like, how are they feeling in that society? That's just what I'm thinking.
And I asked this question because, frankly, in my life, I've gotten a lot more in sort of being a little bit more outspoken about saying, like, unlike Adam, I'm committed to not having kids, which is I think more rare. I think most people.
That's much rarer. That's much rarer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, I'm on the fence. The other thing is, I think I'm a bit older than you, Adam. I can't,
just a little bit.
Because guys have a biological clock too, not in terms of like fertility, but actually quality.
There is some research saying that.
Here's one thing I heard is outside of Down syndrome, most of the genetic risks for babies comes from the father's shitty sperm because it's old.
Yep.
So the idea that there's no biological factor here or of age for the man is wrong. Your sperm ain't getting better with time. Okay. And number two is okay. I have generally heard from women more agreement, or sometimes they even raise the issue of being like, maybe not having kids is actually kind of cool. Men are kind of like, non-committal about it, right? They're kind of like, I'm happy for now, but I could always do it. Just boop boop, Give me a soundboard. Give me something of a man impregnating.
Shooting.
It's the pistol again.
Pistons. Pew, pew.
Okay.
I could always,
the laser, the pew pew it.
Silence pistol. Okay.
I'm not shooting blanks.
They sound like blanks though. The pew.
It does sound like blanks. Yeah, that's pretty weird. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's the money shot.
Yep. And so I think I've in my life heard more.
We'll get back to your comment here, Jess.
Yeah, who were voicing this idea that raising kids isn't really for me. I think maybe just kind of living and pursuing life entirely on my own terms and having the freedom to retire early and just being free of all the entrapments. That's the other thing is the way to go. I've heard that more from women than men.
I think it's very trendy thing, right? To say I made the decision consciously, maybe with my partner as well, to not have kids. I also have a lot of conversations with Chris and Eliza about like people who regret that afterwards, especially women, right?
Who regret having kids or not having?
No,
kids?
not having
Not
kids.
having
Like
kids.
deciding in their
Not
20s and early 30s to like not, avoid that whole journey, right? And then later they're in their 40s and they're upset about it because they're like, well, I've changed my mind and now I can't do it.
Oh, it happens
Or
all
it's
the
harder.
time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time because they in their minds they're just putting it off or whatever, or they think that they're not really they haven't really thought it through, and they hit 40, they have this crisis of meaning, and they're like, I have to have a kid to have meaning in my life, and I'm like, that's the absolute worst, in my opinion, the absolute worst reason to have a kid is to give your life meaning.
I would say I do think though that feeling of regret is probably real. But yeah, but if you're just gonna have a kid to like fill that meaning gap or meaning crisis, then yeah, that's not a good reason to do it.
That's what I'm saying. The
Taking it out
best
very
reason
well.
to have a kid is because
Yeah.
you fucked up. I think that's the best reason. I think that's the OG reason to have
You
a kid.
literally
It's like,
fucked
I
and
didn't want to
fucked it
have a
up.
kid.
Jeez.
Fucking happened.
That's not the OG. That's not the OG. That's not the OG reason to have kids. I think the OG reason to have kids is like I need a bunch of people like
Help on
working
the farm.
hands help me on the farm. And these days, I
gather
think
resources,
the
right?
They
the
might be
reason to
taken
have
out by typhoid.
the equivalent, yeah, exactly, because you're like fucking guessing here, right? That's why you have the spare kid, right? Because they fucking die, and you need to keep your legacy going or your monarchy going. These days, I think the equivalent of that is who is going to take care of me when I'm like 60 and have dementia, or 70 and have dementia.
Hopefully 70.
Absolutely.
No, but I'm serious. Like there's this, and this is very interesting because I think there's an Asian element to this too, right? About like where do you send your parents when they start to age?
That's insanely selfish, dude. Like that's even worse than the farmhand thing. It's like, yeah, we didn't have kids because we need an at-home like geriatric nurse.
I'm not saying anyone's
Yeah.
having kids because they're planning ahead for when they're fucking 75.
No, I think some
right?
people do. I've heard it. I've heard
Oh,
people use that. I don't know if that was the reason, but I've heard people express that.
I'm just talking about
Be
the
a big
reality.
fear.
I'm just
It's
talking
like,
about
I don't want to be alone when I'm old. I need to have I need to have adult children come and visit me and keep me company.
Well, that's important
like-
because having company is a big part of maintaining your cognitive health, your brain health when you're older. Like it is a big deal.
Yeah, but it's still insanely selfish.
I
to me. Like, the reason I
I
created
agree
life was
if that's the reason you did it. I
Yeah.
think most people don't do that, but it is a reality people are coming up against, especially now with lower birth rates, right? Especially now when you
Agreed.
have
Oh,
all
agreed.
these-
But
yeah.
look at your friends. How many of them are really taking great care of their elderly parents? Maybe half.
well,
Maybe less. It's a toss of the die too that your kids are going to get to a point
It really
in
is. You
life
can't really
where
bank
they're
on
going to
that.
give a shit about you. And plus, but look, people are having them so late that you're going to need to have them come and drop off your adult diapers when they're only like 35 years old. Right?
Yeah.
30,
Yeah.
It's not like way down the road. It's like when they're like, 35,
When they're
36.
like 45 and 50
Right,
and raised a
guess
couple of
what?
kids,
right about the time that they're starting to have their first kids is when you're getting old and you need adult dependents. And suddenly they're like, okay, my elderly parents on the one hand or this fresh smelling baby on the other. Guess which one's going to get the attention?
mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
in fact, actually, it's more likely that you're going to be relied upon as the babysitter, not the other. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of problems with that idea, I think.
Yeah, I'm just saying
I'm very negative
I'm just
on
saying it's a reality, right? Like it's a reality that people come up against. And I think even if you did have kids, a lot of them are gonna send you off to some old folks home, a nursing home or whatever. Right? But I also seen instances where the kids are by their parents' bedside until they die, right? Like that's also true. And especially if you raise good kids who you have a strong connection to. I think that's a big part of it as well. And again, I'm not saying that's going to happen for everyone. I don't think there's their plan, but I'm saying it's just a reality that more people have to deal with now that they're deciding not to have kids at all.
I mean, I think it is a bad idea to have that be the primary factor in why you'd want to have kids. But to be real for a second, that's sort of the position that I'm in right now. Because my dad passed when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And then my mom recently started to show some moderate symptoms of dementia starting last year during the pandemic, and had to move her down here. And she lived with us for a while, but we decided that it was best for her to be in assisted living and for me to visit often, because I couldn't provide her with the sort of stimulation or like social interaction that she would have wanted otherwise. She likes doing arts and crafts and things like that. I don't really have
Also
time to
just
think
care,
of stuff
right?
like that and to do
Like
it.
being able to take care of her. Like,
Yeah, so the way I see it is like the time that I want to spend with her, I want it to be quality social time. I don't want it to be sort of utilitarian, take care of like very basic needs type stuff.
Right.
And like seeing what she does not have, if I were not there, like it does sort of inform, I'd say at least like 1/3 of my motivation for wanting to have kids, from the perspective of maybe not so much the help as much as just like
The company.
yeah, the company, knowing that like years of investment and socialization have paid off into this independent adult that is making it out on their own, feeling like those years really meant something to me, and then having something to show for it later on. So, I mean,
you thought about this more than I have, and I'm actually.
I mean, like, I think all of this stuff is valid. I just think that, like, if it's the primary reason for why you do or do not want to have kids, it's probably going to be a short-sighted decision. But I feel like these are important things to consider. I mean, if you plan on having your kids outlive you, I mean, you kind of start thinking about like what you want their life to become and the sort of relationship you want to have along with them as they go along. And I feel like my experiences with my mom, now that I have to take care of her more, take care of more things, do the administrative stuff, that, you know, I think it would be tremendously rewarding to. I don't think I could really surpass the job my parents did because, like, you know, a generation ago, and this kind of speaks to something that Teen was talking about, was that I feel like one generation ago or before that, parents were a lot more dedicated and focused on being parents solely, where I feel like there's a lot more focus on, like, you can have it all. You can have your own social life, you can have your own career, and you can be a parent and be good at it too. And I don't believe that shit.
And be your kids' friends.
Exactly, and be your
which I feel is like the
fundamental
flaw in that mindset. Like, because even as a mentor, right? I am not actually their friend, as like they would have in like their school class, right?
Yeah.
I am an adult that has to take care of them, and I have a relationship with them, but it's not a friend relationship.
Yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy.
It's even heightened if I were their actual parent.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that is a fundamental flaw in sort of the mentality that has changed, because and I just want to get back to Jess's comment here, is saying that, like, I guess one worry that she's had is that she wouldn't be able to, like, because sort of related to the other comment that Monica had, but like maybe from a different perspective, that I couldn't do as good a job as my parents did, right? So she worried, Jess is saying that she worries about that. So like I when I was growing up, I wasn't friends with my dad. I'm not friends with my mom, right? Like, my dad was my dad. Like, they were both different sides of discipline and teachers and taking care of me, but I wasn't friends with them. There's no friend relationship. Right?
Dude, there's an outbreak of narcissism among parents. Let's face it. There's no need to sugarcoat this shit. There's just so many fucking narcissistic parents out there, and it was markedly different before. I think the social environment has deteriorated. I'm only speaking for America. I don't know about Canada. Canada is often better in many respects.
I mean, no, but from a cultural perspective, there are similarities, right? Like, we have affected by similar things. Let's say it's social media, for one, right, is one thing. The origin of the wife guy is about, on social media, talking very jubilantly about your relationship with your married relationship with your wife. In the same way that there's a whole spectrum of people who love to show off about their kids, and they have kids almost.
Yeah, it's a generation of parents of youngest children who are just supremely image conscious and anxious. They're super anxious about their image. They lack DGAFness, right? They totally give a fuck, and it's the results are not good. I don't think that they're doing a great job, man.
I think it really speaks to, I guess, the number one thing that I think is important in terms of being emotionally ready to have kids, and that's shedding your own hangups and insecurities, or like various things about the past that would make you conscious of those things when they get in the way of becoming like a good family member or a good parent. So like being conscious about your image and like wanting to present this idyllic life on social media. Like, if you're really that concerned about it, you're putting that effort there rather than putting it in your kids, and something is being sacrificed as a result.
You know who actually seems to escape that problem?
Oh,
are parents who have kids younger. I've noticed that people I know who had children younger in their 20s tend actually to like be, this is not surprising, more mature than adults their age who haven't had kids.
Do you think there's sort of like maybe a little bit more desperation, either economically or like, oh shit, we don't know what we're doing sort of thing that plays into
No,
that?
I
Or
think
is it
there's
other factors?
I think that they're just better practiced at it, and I don't know whether there's like some biological timing thing here that aligns where you're supposed to have kids like in your 20s and not your 40s, and that like you as a parent are like going through your own form of like development
Mhm.
and getting older and wiser.
Yeah.
Whereas,
yeah.
like, if you put that off for too long, you know, like
I could see that.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, you could become
element
like out of touch with the
of truth
sorts of
to that.
things that you would need to do to like be a proper parent. Whereas like
Yeah.
if you're used to a certain level of peace, certain level of convenience and comfort, and then you have kids, you're like, oh shit, I don't want to go back to times when I needed to sacrifice all this stuff.
Also, dude, there's loads in New York City. There's loads of dudes in their 30s who are still dating.
Yeah,
You see
there
what I'm
are.
saying?
Sure.
Whereas
Yeah.
you also have in other places of the country of guys in their mid-20s who have 2 kids.
Yeah,
That's a world of difference.
absolutely.
And guess who's going to be like more stable and less like more emotionally stable and less image conscious and hyper self-aware is going to be that dude with the 2 kids. He doesn't give a fuck, man.
No, I agree. Exactly.
There's a greater probability of that.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
I mean,
'cause
not a
like-
guarantee, of course.
Because a guy or gal who's in their 30s and still dating and maybe chooses to have a family later, they've bought into the idea that they need to have their independence for longer because it's cool and trendy and like looks great on social media.
Right, and you're really
to have
missing
that
something.
life.
Like you're actually missing something if you don't.
Yeah,
do it.
you bought into the idea of like I had to be independent and have a career and all that stuff, and you don't think about family until you're it's late.
Philip,
right?
it's funny. The thing that you said about how some people want to have kids because they worry about like their, you know, in their old age, like who's going to take care of them.
I didn't say that. I didn't say they're having kids to have kids to take care of them. I'm saying it is helpful to have kids so they take care of you later in life.
Okay, I mean, but it's like one angle of thinking about this, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think actually the problem is actually my experience of the problem is actually reversed. The problem that I have as a grown adult without kids is like, okay, well, what the fuck do I care about? Like, what's my bottom line, right? I think that the big advantage of having children is just like you have a prepackaged purpose in life. It's like this is my bottom
Yeah.
line, and
Yes.
I don't know if like I necessarily would have chosen this or whether this is the ideal situation for me, but I don't have a fucking choice. And there's a degree of freedom that's actually removed from
Oh, you
your
have
life.
a choice.
That's
You
a
totally have a choice. You could be a deadbeat dad. You could do that. It's an option. It's not a good option, but you could do that. Some people choose to do that.
But okay, but fuck them. Fuck those people. I don't care about those people.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that like if you're okay, fine. Let's just talk about decent human beings. If you understand that like, you know, this life that you've created is now 100% like I don't really have a choice. This is my bottom fucking line. I'm supposed to die for this baby if I have to. I'm told. It just simplifies life way the fuck down.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
you don't
Absolutely.
really have a
Sure.
crisis of meaning in that, you know, like I don't know, maybe some people still do, but I'm not saying all fathers necessarily go through this, but for me, from my outsider perspective, as a man without children, I think that that's actually quite a nice luxury in a weird way. Maybe it's the grass is greener thing, but parents always complain about not having the freedom because they have kids.
Mhm.
And me, as someone with total freedom, I'm like, dude, not having freedom is great peace of mind. Because a lot of
Yeah, you
times
know what
what
your
you
focus
call
is gonna be.
freedom is just like my mind can just go anywhere.
Yeah.
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 It's just like I could be totally, you know, they're not anchored to anything, right? And people can get kind of weird if they're not clear about what their
Right.
bottom line is. And I
Right.
think that the big advantage for being a parent is you don't have that confusion.
Yeah, I guess
Man,
it really does bring a sense of purpose and clarity that
Yeah.
is much clearer than when you have that sort of freedom.
Super clear, right?
I think it does, but I think it's not a guarantee, right? Like I had a friend who had 2 kids and he went through a bout of depression, had to like leave work and stuff, take a sabbatical for some time. You know, I also know, you know, people still have midlife crises when they have kids. It's actually very typical to hear about a man who buys a sports
Yes.
car.
Yeah,
because he's
this is
in
why I
his
say
late
it's an
40s and has 2
outsider
kids.
view. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, not all fathers see this or get this because maybe from their perspective, they're pining for what I have, which is total freedom
Maybe.
and whatever. And I'm just saying, as someone who is in that position, there's a reverse view of like, dude, you have it all figured out in a way.
Well,
Right?
you
haven't
have-
experienced.
No,
the-
you
haven't
have
experienced-
a list of responsibilities you must do now, and that might distract you from existential crisis.
Yeah.
Well,
not
yes,
just
that's
distract you,
possible.
But you're, as a father, I think your spiritual affairs have been ordered for you, and you don't have to worry about that shit.
You can have spiritual affairs outside of raising your dumbass kid. Like it's still
No,
possible.
but in terms of what your ultimate foundation is, to me,
I think
I
it
would
just takes
think-
of your. I think it just takes of your time, and I think it takes. I mean, I'm agreeing with you. That it takes of your time in a very structured way. Like you got. There's something that you gotta do for an infant who's 0 to 2 months, and then 2 to 4 months, and then 4 to 6 months, and 6 to 12 months. They're just things you gotta do, and it occupies your 24 hours or 16 waking hours a day.
yeah.
And that distracts you from all the other stuff you're describing as other
Well-
existential crises that men have, when human people have when they exist.
Well, I
Right.
guess what I'm saying is I from my perspective don't see that as a distraction. From my perspective, I'm like, wow, that's amazing, because it means
Okay.
that you just have a very clear idea of what you're here to do. Like, what is your ultimate utility here?
But
Yeah.
again, it sounds like we're assuming that like you're a respectable human being that has a deep respect for their responsibilities rather than being a shitbag. Right?
Well, or what I'm saying is that the opportunity is there for fathers to take that. Whether
Yes.
they take it or not is a different question.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And I'm not saying it's easy to take, but I'm just offering this view of saying, like, look, if you don't have children, right, that option isn't so clear. You got to find other ways to make yourself valuable,
Yeah.
and you got to find other ways to ground yourself and not get like way ahead of yourself and like become have a shitty personality because
Yeah.
you're super narcissistic or whatever. You don't have this thing that constantly humbles you and
Right.
keeps your feet solidly tied to the ground.
Right. That's
And
another.
that-
Yeah.
That might feel painful and annoying to fathers, but it's also a huge service and advantage to them as people,
Yeah.
from my perspective.
Do you guys remember the last time we did a Wife Guys episode, and Teen, you kind of like unleashed your theory of going from like the fuckboy part of your life to like the serious like marriage part of your life, right? Like
Yeah.
making that distinction between the two. When you want to do one, commit to that one, that's fine. You want to do that, you do that, right? Go
Yeah.
clubbing, go on Tinder or whatever. When you want to commit, like take that seriously, it's a different part of your life from that, right?
Yeah, totally different domain.
I think that like the choice of having a kid and becoming a father is that third, phase, right? But you had to make the
Yes.
decision. There's a
Yes.
crossing of the threshold between maybe marriage, maybe not, and the having it like the father stage, right? And it's perfectly fine for people to choose not to do it, right? But you had to similarly cross the threshold and say, I just don't want to do it.
Or it could have been the case that men had children more or less unplanned. Family planning is a new thing, like in relative terms. Like people didn't actively plan their families; they just kind of were like, "Okay, I'm an adult man now with a job. I'm just gonna start fucking." And apparently, kids happen.
See what
to do
happens.
that. And yeah, and then the existence of the children, I think, propel the guy into being like, "Oh shit." Like
This shit's real now.
Shit's real now, right? You had the kid came first, and then the real and then the decisions, like the mental adjustments that had to be made.
Right.
occurred
Well,
after
yeah.
that. But now it seems to be the reverse, where it's like the men are supposed to make mental adjustments first, and then be like, "I'm ready to have a kid,"
Yeah, because I
It
think we're
used to be
talking
like
about an
the kid came
ideal.
first, and then becoming ready to be a father came after.
Well, also the whole idea that you're going to be completely ready to have a kid, I think, is sort of a false sort of idea.
Probably,
I don't think anyone's really ever 100% ready to have a kid.
No,
I think
until
I
after
think
they've
you
had it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be like, I'm ready, like I this is as ready as I'm going to be, or I've decided I'm going to have a kid. But like
That's
ready is just a weird way of putting it.
I mean, one piece of advice I've heard from other parents is like it's never a good time to make the decision to have a kid.
There's never going to be a
Right.
perfect time, right?
There
Like,
never be a
you're-
perfect time, and I think that rings quite true.
Yeah, Yeah.
Right. Whether you're individually ready as the father or the mother or whatever, is up to them to kind of decide. But like as an overall thing to go and cross and have the kid and so on, like there's always excuses. There's always going to be some, bullshit excuse you can come up with that gets in the way, right? And these days, there's a lot of excuses, there's a lot of reasons to not do it, right? As we were talking about earlier with like climate change and so on.
Yeah.
That's a very common thing now, which I think is part of leading to the.
How seriously do you take that though? I always still feel like that's, at least for like a Canadian, where you all probably stand to benefit from climate change to an extent. I'm not sure how serious a thing that is. I sometimes wonder if that's just sort of like first world problems. And
Actually, when I think about it, just real quick, just something stupid, I'm thinking about how cold it is in Michigan. Canada's north of that. And I've been thinking about, like, with Texas, and it gets to 120 degrees, like very dry heat during the summer. Canada does seem like the perfect place to move to in case of climate catastrophe.
Yeah, it's good for
Yeah.
us until you all annex us, right? Like that's when it goes south a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah, you already kind of belong to us anyway.
Yeah, more or less.
We'll
right?
just make it formal.
Yeah.
51st
It would be
state.
bloodless too. I think Trudeau would just be like, yes, you can have it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I actually had this really serious conversation with my wife last night about this whole climate thing, because COP27 is happening and like nothing's happening, right? I think it comes down to a real test of whether or not you're a true pessimist or optimist about the climate situation we're in, right? If you're a true pessimist, then you could make a moral argument that having a kid in this time, because the kid's going to be in their 30s when it's 2050, when we're all going to melt and die, right? There's been recent machine learning tools that come out just like last week that show you like how deep will the water be in Florida,
Right.
You can
Which
put in
regions
a zip code
yeah.
to tell you how fucked you are in terms of heat waves and water level, flood rates,
Insects, disease,
amount of money
hurricane,
you're
all
gonna be
that
spending on
Nice.
insurance and repairs, right? Like shit like that. Okay, like all this catastrophic doomer shit, right? Are you an optimist or a pessimist about the situation we're in? It's a very serious question that you're confronted with as a parent to be or a parent.
But you're assuming equal effects on all people. I mean, some people are going to get fucking wiped
Yeah.
out. Bangladeshis are going to get wiped
Yeah.
out.
Right. I
Done
said
deal.
Canadians will be fine.
I said that to my wife, right? I was like, look, it's going to be really bad. Like, you're not wrong to worry about this. But I also think that in the situation we're in, like, it's sad and selfish to say, but we're probably going to be okay. And it's going to be hard, but, like, we'll make it work out. And this is me trying to console her, right? She was really upset last night about this. But that's
the
part
only
of
real
it.
question Canadians should be asking is, will you be able to defend your borders and make sure that all those goddamn climate refugees don't come crawling through?
Yeah, and like there's a lot of stuff you can't.
Let's be real.
There's a lot of stuff you're trying to predict here, right? Like, should those predictions change how you feel about like this very important decision? I know for each individual person to figure out, I think. But I think what I realized personally for myself confronting this question is that I'm actually a optimist about climate. Like, I think we're gonna eventually solve it, but it's gonna be a really painful process. Many will die. It's gonna be really rough.
Many of you will die. But
Yeah,
I am
no,
prepared
like-
to make that sacrifice.
Well, I mean, but this isn't. Let's just say throughout human history, this isn't like the first time there have been bad sort of climate conditions or bad
anything.
societal
World War II?
positions or any of that stuff, right? Like,
World War II is the fucking worst thing that we've ever
Yeah.
experienced. Since.
I mean, in
they
Europe,
had a
there
great
was,
they had a great life after
yeah.
that.
I mean,
Right.
Europe's had multiple plagues and multiple things, right? Like, natural disasters could have wiped out people all over the place, right? We had almost no control over any of that stuff.
Look at people
No.
in Asia. Look at people
Right.
all over Asia, where they started from when our parents were born
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
till now.
So I
and in the
wouldn't-
West,
yeah,
we would call that a period of decline. Oh, you know,
right.
from the-
right.
No,
And
to
how
them,
could you
I
have
mean, it was a
children
fucking
going into that? Right.
brilliant, you know.
Right. So,
So,
like, I
it
didn't.
depends.
Yeah. I wouldn't. I don't think it's actually. There's much. I don't put too much stock in like an argument that anyone will want to make to say you're like a monster to have a kid in like these times and have them grow up. And I don't think that's. I don't think. Obviously, man-made climate change is not something that's happened before throughout human history, but there have been periods of disaster and
it's already
people have kids, right?
Well,
Like,
no, it's already
fine.
a disaster.
Yeah.
In the U.S. and in Canada, we think about this in terms of like, well, what about the future? Well, there's already people who are getting completely fucked by this.
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Islands
there are people-
disappearing.
and there are people getting fucked by all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
That we're not getting fucked by. I think this sudden Western hypervent, like just really being really worried about the future. I'm like, dude, the present already sucks ass.
Yeah, just not for you right now. Right?
So
Yeah.
meaning if you're worried about the future, rather than being like, oh, the present is terrible, and so instead of a will it or won't it, it's a is it or is it not, tells you that we fundamentally only care about ourselves, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we should all become like, oh, I care about every single person in the world, but let's not pretend that we do. We care about ourselves. We care about the lives of our children, how they're going to do, not how the whole world's going to do. And that's true because if we even posing the question, like, is the future going to be really bad? Well, the present fucking sucks, just not for us. So, you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? We don't give a shit. We give a shit about the outcome for our own kids. And I think for American kids or Canadian kids or whatever, man, I can't see someone being born now living a really awful life, because of something like climate change.
At least not here in Canada or in the United States. Some parts.
That's my point. In other parts of the world, they're already fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even then, I wouldn't say that they're like horrible human beings for having kids. It's like.
Yeah, I have a response to those people, right? I don't think anyone would say that in the right mind because it's kind of a pretty rude thing to say to.
Yeah, but some people think that.
They think it, and some people have that vibe of like,
Incredibly
I'm
moralistic
cool. I'm
about
not
it.
having kids
Yeah.
because climate is bad or whatever.
Some
I have a response to them.
self-righteous.
I've thought about this, and I think my stance on it has become more emboldened because like I'm going to become a dad and I need to take care of my kid no matter what, right? And my response to that is get the fuck out of my way. Like if you're admitting that you're a climate pessimist, you think we're fucked, okay? I actually want to have a family and try to do something about this. Get the fuck out of my way.
What? How are they in your way though?
Because they're not contributing to the problem. They're just like, oh, you're screwed. You're a monster. You're not doing anything. It's just a very.
Are they saying that
defeatist...
people having kids are monsters? I think they're just.
Well, this is a hypothetical situation that Adam's presenting to me, right?
I think some people think that. I think some people would. Maybe they don't say it in that way.
No, but they're not saying that people
criticize
who have kids are the problem. They're just saying they don't want to have kids, and they're using. I think they're using climate as a rationalization for it. When they should be saying, I'm kind of selfish. I'm not that responsible, and I love to travel without
That's
kids,
probably a bigger proportion of people, but I definitely think there are people who are who moralize about.
I think there are people that moralize about it.
But are they blaming people who have kids? I haven't heard that.
I would say yes. I've definitely seen it. I've seen it online.
How does having kids contribute to climate change?
You're a bad person because they're going to suffer, and you're choosing to.
Well, not just they're going to suffer, but they're going to add to the
carbon footprint,
the carbon footprint, et cetera, right? Like it's and look,
I haven't heard that as much. I've heard more just people in what I think is they're just a little bit self-centered and selfish, and they don't really want to go through the rigors of raising a family, and they use climate change as an excuse to not do it.
I agree with you, Teen, but I think look, here's the thing to think about, right? Like, who are the people who are the most emboldened individuals around fighting against the climate crisis right now? It is young people. It is these fucking idiots who go to the galleries and throw paint on the Van Gogh painting.
I would say it's actually me. I'm probably the number one eco warrior of anyone I know in my circle.
Because you don't go anywhere, you don't do anything.
Because I spend less than $1,000 a month.
Yeah, but your footprint is still bigger than many other people around the world who live in.
No, it's not. It's
not
tiny.
yours.
No. I can tell you straight up, my footprint is tiny. Because I know the kilowatt hours.
Talking about sitting by
the BTUs that I consume. It's tiny.
Passively versus trying to do something. It's young people trying to do something because they're the ones who are concerned.
Yeah,
about
I think the less people do, the better. Just stop using so much energy.
That's part of it. But
literally, look, you could solve the climate crisis in a very simple way. Stop using so much energy. We don't have to transition everything. The reason they want to talk about.
So this is the last episode of this live stream because this live stream.
No, this is how our podcast is all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I think that we're constantly saying like what we want to do is we want to have our cake and eat it too. Like
I don't know if that's what Philip is saying, right?
No. We as a society don't really want to decrease our energy usage. We just want to make it more environmentally friendly. The amount
more
of consumption
efficient,
that we do,
less.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that
I would say that's true.
Actually, we should really be thanking the people in the who's really getting shit done is the people who are like living in poverty. They're like people who don't have shit. They're the ones that are really contributing to this climate fight because they're not using up any fucking energy. Their energy footprint's like fucking minuscule. Your average Westerner is like, with their house in travel.
Oh yeah, I mean America's per capita, Europe.
Yeah, so you go around virtue signaling all you want about, oh yeah, I joined this march, and I signed up for. Oh fuck that! Just stop flying, stop driving, turn on your air conditioner less, get used to hot, get used to cold.
Yeah,
live in a smaller place.
I do not disagree with you that like if this is a discussion about the solutions, okay, and we should have that discussion maybe with Arnav and people who know more about this kind of stuff, right? I'm talking about like people who are the generation of people who are like you really.
I don't trust anyone in Silicon Valley to have the answers.
I'm not talking about Silicon Valley.
Work in a fucking startup doesn't mean anything.
No, I'm talking about activists, right? Like I'm talking about the people who are like in Extinction Rebellion and so on.
Thunberg, yeah.
They're younger. Yeah, maybe she's got all sorts of issues, right? But like younger people, right? The idea is that younger people are going to carry the torch on this problem because they're the ones who are going to be fucked by it.
Oh, fuck them. The person who is really carrying the torch, we are not recognizing. It's the average poor ass person in the world, in the global south or wherever it is, just living their normal ass life. Just go to India, go to any crowded ass city in India, pick any one of those people in that crowd. They're a climate warrior. You know why? Because their energy footprint is tiny.
And I don't disagree with you, but that person's not going to have a lot of effect on getting the.
They're having a massive effect. If those people were consuming at the levels that we consume at, the planet would be at 8 degrees tomorrow. So
yeah,
kudos to them for living a tiny little life.
Anyway, that was not the point I was making. The point I was making is that so I watched this interview with this like CEO of some climate tech company. Not sure if they're actually doing anything useful or not. Interesting. They're called Plan A. This
nice.
Company. And one question that a person asked the CEO on a panel was like, what's your stance on like having kids? Like, do you're a CEO of some climate company, you purport to care about the environment and the future of the planet. What's your stance on having kids? And her response was, I think that having kids is a reasonable thing to do if you raise those kids to have a good stance on the environment and taking care of, stewardship of our planet, right? Because they're able to do more to help protect the planet than our fucking old fogies and myself and so on have done up to this point. And part of that might be, to your point, living with a smaller footprint, right? Right. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was helpful. I don't know if it's going to end up being true, but I thought it was helpful to think like, yeah, you can raise a kid who is going to be better on that front than you were and help maybe push some effort in that direction, right? Like to actually do something around activism or whatever. I don't know, entrepreneurship. I don't know what it's going to be. There's a whole lot of shit we got to do to solve this problem. But I thought that was helpful.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, I think those people I know who are raising kids are disasters in terms of climate, regardless of their political beliefs.
Well, yeah,
because they're flying off.
They're driving SUVs and flying around to go skiing.
Exactly.
I know.
They live in ginormous houses that they.
I wonder what the carbon footprint for. I wonder what the carbon footprint is for a chairlift.
That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah. There's just a lot of posturing over this issue or whatever, and no one's really doing anything. And the thing that you really need to be doing is just consuming less.
But that's
no one wants to do that.
I think that's
they still want to maintain. This is. I guess I'm saying is like, the really hard thing to do as a parent is to raise your kid with less. To not send them to the best schools, to not live in the absolute, to not have all the experiences, to not go on all these vacations, to not experience it all, to not have it all. And that maybe the less is more. Maybe actually it's people who grew up without that mature faster, that are more resilient, that can do more, and not the children that have been given everything. And that is a fundamental thing that I think a lot of people are getting wrong. And it is a
Absolutely.
real turnoff for me
I-
in terms of wanting to be a parent.
I agree with you, and I'll give you some evidence, right?
Yeah.
One thing that has been a big topic of conversation for me since the impending child is what is all the shit we gotta buy to have this kid, once we have this kid, right?
Yeah.
All this fucking bullshit we gotta buy. And like I cared a lot about this stuff. Like, so I think about not the buying part, but like the climate part, right? So I think like things like how much of this shit can you just like get used or like get as a hand me down or buy used or whatever, right? And not
Absolutely.
like, because there's so much shit you have to fucking buy to support this new human being. It's absolutely crazy. We have a whole running spreadsheet of stuff we gotta buy, right? And if that's the starting point, I think it's the starting point for a lot of parents. It's like I had to buy all this shit: a crib, a stroller, a travel system. If you even know what that is, you know what a pack and play is? You gotta buy a pack and play. All these clothes. They're gonna grow out the
clothes.
clothes
Dude, the
in
clothes.
2 weeks. They'll be growing out the clothes. All this bullshit, right? Diapers, like, that is. I don't know if there's another way of dealing with a child, but in this North American, Western, first world, situation we live in, consumerism is at the core of having kids. Maybe that's part of why they want us to have more kids. I don't know, right? But you're right, Dean. Like, this is a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that parents will never consciously do, and they shouldn't. I'm not saying parents should do it, but it is. I think if there's a problem, I'm not worried about climate change or that. I am worried about I'm worried about climate change. I'm not worried about climate change in relation to parenting, right? But I think I am worried about this sort of like. It's sort of a catch-22 for like wealthy societies or almost like post-industrial societies like ours, which are chronically living beyond our own means and financing everything. Everyone's financing everything with debt, right? And I think the problem with this is that we cannot be expected, nor should we be expected, to live a more materially constrained life than we have to. Like, why would I choose the ascetic way as a parent? I want to give my kid everything, of course.
Yeah.
The problem is that we can do it. And so no one ever makes the choice to go with less, because why would you?
Yeah.
It's stupid. But then you still eat the negative effects of doing that. And you see it all around us, and I've only a few very conscientious parents that I know actively try to give their kids less than more. And they're very mindful about it. It's never easy for someone to give their kid less than they possibly could. Most parents are quite maximalist about it.
Yeah, because society hasn't made the case yet that giving your kid less can actually give them a happier, healthier upbringing than if you gave them more, right? Because everything is about like, you got to have the best thing, the best education, the best toys, the best hobbies, and so on. They're all costing money.
That's why Monica's question to me was a really good one, because it's like we always think of how can we give our kids more than we got. We never look at our own childhood and think, well, what went right? Like, how did I get to this point in my life where I feel like I'm a well-developed adult? Was it the things that I was given, or was it the things that I didn't have that I had to get around or overcome that?
We often be like, what
because
would
we're so
I not
scared
do?
of negative thinking.
Right.
We're
Like,
so
what would
scared of thinking about maybe not having that was good, So, but it's just an insanely saccharine, positive vibe out there, because it is a very like you said, it's a consumerist society. Ultimately, this is all coming from marketing messaging and stuff like that. They don't give a shit about whether you're a good parent or whether your kids turn out right. They just want them to spend money. So,
yeah, I think back to this makes me think of this one very
I agree with that too.
seminal, is that the right word? Like, experience I had in my life. I went to a new school in 5th grade, transferred to a new school, and I was desperate, I guess, at that point to make friends, and so I made a couple of friends I thought at school, a Korean kid and a Japanese kid actually, and they came over to my house, and I live really far away from where they were because I'm like transferring from like a poor part of Toronto to a rich part of Toronto. For this
How old were you? This was
5th grade, right?
Oh,
so like
okay.
9,
Elementary
10.
school.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And my friends came up to my neighborhood and they came to my house, and the first thing they noticed was that I didn't have a stereo.
Okay, like a boombox or
Yeah,
something.
boombox, like
Stereo system.
CD cassette player, CD player at the time, I guess. And
Probably
they
record player still.
yeah, they made well, we didn't have record player, we didn't have any of that stuff, right? Because my parents were
Yeah,
poor.
you didn't have it.
So like they made fun of me about it, and I developed a complex about it, and I obsessed for weeks after that about buying one, right? Maybe my parents spent a bunch of money to buy one, right? And now I look back at that, and I realized that that was like one of the moments where I developed a very strong like anti-consumerist viewpoint that I still hold to this day, right? Of like not wanting to have fucking luxuries, not pretending you're better than somebody because you have some luxury.
It's a hard-learned lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you can't skip the steps. But if I could make my kid not feel the pain of being the poor kid in school,
Yep.
of course I would.
Yes,
Why
exactly.
would I ever want my
Yeah.
kid to be the poor kid in school?
Yeah.
But they're not going to learn that lesson. It's a weird catch-22 with this.
Money is a shortcut, right? Like having the ability to afford these luxuries and have your kid be above other kids at school and so on, wherever they exist socially, is a shortcut, a parenting shortcut to some extent.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I totally don't blame parents for wanting to give their kids everything that they can.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I also frankly see that a lot of them are raising pretty stunted children in a way that a lot of my friends growing up as immigrant kids with immigrant parents that didn't know shit about how to fit in, we figured it out for ourselves. And now I see a generation that are intentionally forgetting these lessons and saying things like, okay, I'm totally going to everything that I had as a kid, I'm going to do it different. I'm not putting my kids through that. I'm like, maybe that's in some senses good, but in some cases that might be a disservice to them.
Yeah.
Because maybe you had a good like if you're a good human being, it's probably because you were raised well in a way. And I don't know why we would necessarily want to turn on all the lessons, turn on all the things that the circumstances that we were raised in, if that makes sense. That's the kind of shit that I think parents are faced with, and it's such an unfair thing to have to deal with. But
yeah. I mean, like Monica had another good comment. She said, I think in America, the decision to have children can feel so loaded and overwhelming, partly because of the atomization of the family structure and the pressure placed on a nuclear immediate family. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about, Teen, there. Like the pressure, all the decisions, all the little things you got to do. And like, am I going to mess my kid up? I don't want my kid to hate me. Is that, all these
Am
things.
I gonna mess my kid up?
Well, I mean, people worry about that.
No,
right?
they do. They absolutely do. Yeah.
Well, think about how loaded a issue it is to say like what is the depth of your responsibility to like a nephew?
Right.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's something we don't really make explicit either, so it's something that people sort of tacitly figure out.
Yeah, how far do you go for a close relative but who's not actually your kid?
Yeah.
That's hard. Right. It's a hard one. I think about it all the time.
I have to think about that too because I have nephews. Yeah.
Because in America, or I don't think it's necessarily cultural, but like when mom and dad are working jobs for companies that are not family owned, your economic life is totally divorced from those other people in your family other than your immediate nuclear family. You are not financially responsible for your cousins, your siblings, your nephews, your second cousins. You're not. Even your parents, you're not really responsible. The only legal responsibility that you have is towards your own children. And the only economic entanglement that you have with anyone else in your family is only to the extent that you have a family business or something like that. And most people don't do that anymore.
Right, because I don't think there's any legal obligation that you need to financially take care of your parents, right? Like it's or even your siblings.
Nope, just your kids.
Yeah,
it's just
up to the age of 18.
Children. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that counteracts that is if you have a family business and your economic life
legally
is
tied together because of corporate structure. Yeah.
And not even legally, but just like your feeling is
right.
I don't work for some company in exchange for wages.
We own this business together and we're
family.
Working. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it especially tough as well.
But I think this atomization of the family structure, I mean, I feel like it's very much the result of being a post-industrial society where parents are pressured to work and they're pressured to work, they're pressured to live close to where they work, but also be in a good school system so their kids can be successful in the future and stuff like that. And, I guess when I think of other cultures that have more mixed generational homes or where a lot of people live together and they're just kind of used to that and that being the norm, I mean, I think some of that really addresses some of the concerns that we've raised with just having kids and things related to climate change, things related to the amount of money you're spending, things related to like the sorts of quality time you're spending with your family. I think a lot of that has to do with just sort of like the economic arrangement of our society and just the sort of downstream effects of the forces that our jobs force us into. So
I mean, don't you know, like I mean, I have some friends that like have family businesses, and their family life is totally different. They're
a lot more involved with each other.
Oh yeah,
But
Like
they have
regardless of if
extended
it's
family
emotional or
networks.
not, it's just like they're more used to other people being there and depending on them or depending on other people.
Yeah, and their brothers are their coworkers. Their
Yeah.
siblings are like their colleagues, and they don't work for a company; they work for the family, and their mentality is totally different in a way. And yeah, it's more. And if you go back, like I don't know when things in Asia is changing fast, but there's still a lot I think of like family businesses and stuff like that. It's just a totally different thing. As like a wage earning American, like I don't understand that shit at all.
Well, we're far away from that. I mean, I think there was probably a point in time where any business that did exist in America was sort of a family business, but we're far away from that now. I mean,
or like the mafia,
Well,
the mafia was always like it's all about family.
The family.
Yeah, mafia is a very family-oriented organization.
Well, I mean, all of their nomenclature and everything they talk about is about family, right? Yeah. But I mean, the atomization of family structure. When I read that phrase, I think of the fact that like the size of our collective village, right, where that throughout human history has always been fairly large, right, and the village has sort of raised everyone else's children within that common village. In America, the size of that common village for each individual, I think, is very small. And absolutely. I think that plays on the second part of this about the pressure placed on the nuclear immediate family, right? And in America, and probably in Canada as well, nuclear family is literally just the two parents, if they're two parents, and the siblings, and that is it. Like it doesn't even. I would even say the nuclear family doesn't necessarily even include like grandparents.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I think that's why we're so like media obsessed and celebrity obsessed and like online, is because like our social bandwidth is not being used up by like actual people.
Right.
And so we fill up all these like available slots with like people we don't actually know, like
celebrity gossip and so on.
Yeah. Well, the parasocial relationships,
all that stuff,
the primacy of these parasocial relationships with people that we've never met and they will never know us is a big issue, and I think it's and I think the economic
getting caught up in these big things, like these big cultural battles, these big partisan politics,
right?
And you know how some
makes us very vulnerable to that.
Politics very deeply. They get like personally offended, like you insulted their mother if you go against the Democratic Party.
You mean like
that's probably because you're like a bit alienated from the concept of family itself, and you think the Dems are your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it makes us vulnerable to that, though, right? It makes us more vulnerable to that type of manipulation.
It makes people lonely too, because
it's the void of the heart,
right? And it's all and
you're having all these one-way relationships with people who don't even know who the fuck you are,
right? And
one interesting thing that I've heard people say is a distinct difference between Canadians and Americans is that in America people are much more geographically mobile. Like you're willing to move to a different town or city to like for a job, basically.
Canadians are.
No, Americans are. But Canadians are more insular. They stick kind of within the city that they grew up in. I don't know if this is fully true, but this has been a pattern that's been described before. I imagine that actually has a huge effect on the ability to raise a family, right? Because you're not going to be near your parents anymore, right? Or your close family for support, which is a big deal. Like you need to have family support, or it's helpful to have some family support when you're trying to raise a kid. So I wonder if that actually makes it a bit tougher in the States, right? Because you're like, you move for a job somewhere else, you met your partner there, you stay there.
Yeah.
You don't, you're not back with the grandparents, right? So you don't have that extra babysitter, etc., right, to help out.
Well, yeah, and I think some people, for some reason, they criticize like this idea that the grandparents will be helping, but I'm like, that's just natural, I feel.
Yeah.
And
It's necessary.
and it's a necessary thing, and we just don't have that type of thing as easily available to a lot of people as it used to be, and that's why I think it elevates the importance of the broader socialized aspects, like universal pre-K and universal access to childcare outside the home, right, in these professional settings. So I'm not going to make a statement about what I think is better or not, or which one we should be striving for, but we're out of balance. I'll say that.
I think that decimated sort of like family networks and peer networks. To me, is much more worrying than climate change as an issue for raising kids. I think that's more of a much like more immediate threat to the well-being of kids these days than climate change.
Yeah, high cost of living means you gotta move to some shit town to afford a house so you can have enough room for your kid. It means you're not with the immediate family anymore. That's definitely a factor.
And just like the sort of cultural environment that surrounds us now.
Yeah, it's not good. If it's not filled by real people, it's filled by all kinds of nonsense like the Sigma grind set and shit like that.
Yeah, like
culture.
Like honestly, like I was worried. I didn't know whether I was being just doomer about this, but like in talking with my nephews more and the stories that they tell me about some of their friends and what's going on. And the more people have reached, I've talked to a lot of people about this who, as parents, have said the same thing. It's like, dude, it's really bad. It's like they're the cultural problems that are plaguing children these days, and like the emotional problems, and you can see it in the outcomes too, in terms of their emotional well-being and their performance in school and stuff. It's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad when like 13-year-olds are joking about their mental health and having breakdowns and stuff. And it's like, dude, you don't even have any stressors yet. Just wait.
Dude, okay, like as an example, this kid that my nephew in his class, in his high school class, he died from a fentanyl overdose.
Damn.
Holy shit.
Fuck.
And his
shit.
this is how bad it is, right? So his father put out a statement saying that this kid had been suffering from alcoholism and depression since the age of 14.
Oh, man.
And he died at 15.
This sounds like the movie Kids.
What the fuck?
Okay, but here's the thing. The father won't shut the fuck up about it and keeps going to newspapers trying to talk about his story. He's trying to turn this into a viral story.
Oh, God.
So the father is like, in a weird way, being having some sort of narcissistic supply from the death of his own son. No wonder the kid was fucking depressed.
That sounds like Scott Adams. I'm glad my addict son died shit. It really is.
His stepson. That made it worse.
Yeah.
Kind of in a way it made it worse. But like, it must be really obvious that this guy's trying to milk it and make it viral and make money off of it. Because
all I know is like a normal person, like, and I've had classmates die in high school and stuff, right? Generally speaking, the family wants to be left the fuck alone. They don't want to talk about it. They don't owe you an explanation.
Right.
Leave us the fuck alone. We're grieving. This guy is out like doing a fucking media tour about his dead kid.
God.
Yeah.
Shit like that. Trust me, that's not the only story. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, ooh, that's poison, man. That's fucking poison. And the shit some of the kids pull on. Did I tell you, like, he was telling me about like one of his friends, he had a secret YouTube channel that he didn't tell nobody about.
What?
Right, they're 15.
Was it some like weird like foot fetish thing or whatever?
No. It was a ASMR based channel.
Oh, okay.
It basically called Your High School Boyfriend. And I'm like, okay,
So
I
do
guarantee
young women
you
crave
that the
this
tens
shit?
of thousands of people that subscribe to this kid's ASMR channel are not 15-year-old girls.
Oh, you bet.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It's
I
40-year-old
see.
men.
Oh
Okay.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just a random sample in America. Okay. I'm
It's
telling you.
it's too simple to chalk this shit up to the internet, right? Like it's just too simple of an answer.
The internet's not helping.
It's not
yeah,
helping.
it didn't help.
It's
Didn't help.
the fact that the kid, like, basically there's no family life to speak of.
Damn.
I mean, outside of your parents who want to be your best friend because they have emotional fucking needs that they
Oh my God.
that
So
they're
you make an
vulturing
ASMR
from their
channel
own
for
fucking
pedos?
children. And then, I mean, look at what this dad is doing. He's fucking vulturing off his kid.
But one thing I will say is that I've been taking, well, we took this parenting course, like how to be a parent course,
Yeah.
yeah.
aka
Okay, what do they say?
how to fuck up your kid 101. And one unit or like subject that we touched on that felt very left field to me was we had a whole section about social media, basically, like being online and so on.
Yeah.
Everything else was about like, raising your kid from like 0 to 6 months, 0 to 12 months, maybe a little bit beyond. But like, there's this big time jump to like, okay, they're like 12 now and they have a smartphone and they're going to be on like TikTok and shit. How do you deal with that shit? Right. And what was apparent to me was that like that stuff was like recently crammed into the curriculum.
Okay.
Because parents are anxious as fuck about this problem. Right. And they're like trying to address, like get ahead of it and address it and get them some
What do
tips or
they
whatever,
say? Like,
right?
what was their advice?
I mean, nothing useful. Like, be conscientious
Yeah.
of it. Like, look out for signs of bullying. Like, just stuff that I already knew. Like, maybe keep your
Stuff
kid away
for out
from
of
it
touch
for some
normies.
time. Have ideas. Or, like, have some kind of like stance on like when they start and how much you track it and so on. Like all this stuff that is obviously you can find some fucking article on the internet, right? That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the fact that it feels like it
Oh,
was
for
like
sure, yeah,
shoehorned
yeah.
into the
Yeah.
curriculum because parents are fucking terrified of this.
As I think they have a right to be. I mean, they're not
Yeah,
irrational.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
fuck if the state's going to do anything about it.
No.
Fuck if the government's going to do anything about
Nah,
But
they're
from like
not.
like from a policy standpoint.
it. No, yeah, because when China did it, didn't they? I think TikTok.
They
actually
limited
has,
the amount of time you could play video
Douyin,
games.
which is the
Games,
Chinese
yeah.
version of TikTok, has an inbuilt
Yeah.
timer of like 40 minutes.
For kids.
And
think
then
for
there's like a
anyone.
timeout, so you can only be in it for 40 minutes, and then there's like a time that you can't even open it.
Okay.
probably, or
Yeah.
It's
something,
like
right?
it's like when you had the Wii and the Wii was like, you want to go outside for a little bit? Like, you remember that?
No, but this is hard
Okay.
enforced.
Yeah, that wasn't a general
Yeah.
prodding.
Yeah, it wasn't like a press.
No, this
press
is like
the
you're
fuck
kicked off.
button.
or like in China also, or like
But fuck if they're going to do that in the U.S.
No.
Well,
of
they're
course not.
definitely not going to do that. And
No,
like,
the ad revenue, man. We got to get
No,
the ad
exactly.
revenue.
That's what I'm saying.
Profit motive.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
it all
Yeah.
comes down
the economics.
to we live in a consumer economy. 70+% of the economy is built on consumer spending.
Right.
I don't even know how that's possible, but anyway.
Well, it's because your friend's
Other
spending
country-
$20,000 a month on crap.
it's through credit, right? And so,
Oh God.
kids are eyed from the very beginning by marketers as spenders, as sources of revenue. They don't give a shit if those kids grow up well. Just
No,
keep spending.
in fact, they want them not to grow up well,
So they
that
can
they're
continue
addicted
spending.
to spending.
Keep spending.
Absolutely.
Loot boxes.
That's the reason why we obsess. I don't know if other countries do this, but we obsess around generations, right? Millennials, now Gen Zs, next Gen Alpha, is because that's the next big glut of people who are spending, who are reaching their spending.
Yeah,
years.
there's no. It's a ratchet. Like, that's the hard thing about this is like you said, no rational parent would want their kid to have less than they could provide, right? You don't want to artificially manufacture, lack for your kids, but like that goes hand in hand with a culture that just wants you to spend more and more.
Right.
And we would never, for example, we just feel hopeless in the face of climate change because we think, are those Silicon Valley people going to save us this time? Or do they really mean it this time? No, they don't. They don't fucking mean it, and they're not going to save us. But we have to keep continuously putting faith in them because God forbid that the answer is like, okay, actually, we know exactly what to do. We all just got to make do with less. No way. That will never happen. We will never choose that path. just like we would never choose the path of giving our kids less.
That's
But
why
that
all the
creates a lot of problems.
that's why all the EVs that are coming out are SUVs, right? Because we've gotten used to having like big ass
Yeah.
flashy cars, and so we're gonna make
Yeah,
them
the
green.
answer isn't to
keep
drive
making-
less, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
The answer isn't to drive less or whatever.
Smaller cars, less
It's like, I
driving.
need a higher
more,
tech car.
or invest in public transit or whatever.
More
Right? It's like,
more.
maintain the cars, but now they're on batteries, so we have all this lithium we gotta dig out of the ground.
Oh, graphite
that's-
is the next thing, right? Like,
Graphene, batteries, whatever.
we need
not-
graphene and graphite. So
Not a single one of my friends, and most of my friends at this point have owned Teslas, and none of them did it for environmental reasons. They did it because Tesla is the cool thing to
Tesla
own.
go fast. Tesla look cool.
Exactly.
Of
Yeah.
course.
None of them went out and bought a Nissan Leaf.
Or a Chevy Bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. Oh yeah, all of a sudden the Tesla Model 3 dual motor comes out and you're like, I want to save the planet. I'm like, yo, the fucking
Yeah.
piece of shit
It's
Ford
a piece of shit car, all right?
What was that Ford thing? The whatever that little hatchback thing? That's been around for ages. You didn't buy that. I didn't see you
Oh,
driving
the
around.
Ford Fiesta.
Right.
Yeah. God bless all the Prius drivers out there because that thing is not cool. And a lot of
No.
them were like, yeah, those are the real environmentalists, the Prius drivers, because that shit never got cool. The Tesla 3 people. I saw a Tesla the other day, which was like.
I see him every fucking day. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, the license plate said no gas for me.
Oh my
God.
god.
Fuck you. I was like, I hope your lithium battery catches on fire, asshole. No lithium ion fires in my garage. For me.
And they lock you in, man. They lock you in because the electrical system will go out, and then people. It happened, and there's video of the guy having like a bystander had to come and break the guy's window open, like the driver's side window open, and other people were like, oh, if you just go on YouTube, you can find a video that would explain to you how you can open your door when the electricity goes out in your car. And someone did it. And they're like, there's a 1 minute unskippable ad at the beginning of this video.
Damn.
So in that 60 seconds, you're going to die from all the fucking toxic fumes that are in the fucking Tesla. And in one of the models, and I think it's the Model 3, there's actually no mechanical way of getting out of the back seat. So like the S,
I heard about
the
that.
S, the Model X, and the Y actually have like a mechanical latch. So like you can just open it. But you don't want to do that regularly because it'll actually break your window, because the window actually goes down a crack when you open it electronically because it's like a frameless window. But the Model 3, there's no mechanical way to getting out of the fucking car if you're in the back seat.
Did you see that?
Ridiculous.
Adam, did you see that in the I think it was the infrastructure bill?
Yeah.
That there was deep in it a provision that actually said that by 2026, the government is going to require that, I think it's EV makers have to put a remote kill switch in the car.
Yeah, no, that came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they have
Did you see that?
Right, because and they're going to say
So
that
law enforcement can just turn your car off.
Yeah, and they're going to say that they're going to say it's for the consumer's protection because of like the spate of like Kias and Hyundais that have been stolen because there's no immobilizer.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an immobilizer. Those immobilizers don't need to be remote kill switches. Those are like, self-contained electrical systems in the car that don't need any remote operator to do it. It's literally so that law enforcement can, or anyone can just shut it down.
This is why I think everyone should get because I don't think we're going to be able to have these cars for much longer. But get an internal combustion.
Get a hybrid.
Car.
If you can get a hybrid,
get a hybrid or whatever. But get a fuel efficient ICE car. It's fine. But
get a Corolla.
Get one that doesn't require regular software updates and cannot be bricked remotely. Because that will be the future. Like after a certain point, we're all switching over to remotely brickable cars.
There's a great anime where this guy, the protagonist in this anime is seen as a weirdo because he drives like this gas powered car, and every other vehicle in like this anime universe is like, robotic or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I haven't watched the whole thing, but like I'm sure part of it is like he he will be able to defeat an enemy because he's got a internal combustion engine and like the EMP won't shut it down. Right? And he doesn't even have like a fancy one with like all the electronics in it. It's like literally like no power steering. It's like all like hydraulics and like physical
hipster,
machine stuff. But yeah, man, I mean,
I'm
this
rolling
is gonna
back, dude, Adam. I'm rolling back all my shit, man. I cut, no fucking streaming.
I did that. I
Channels
cut
for
down
me.
all of my streaming
Okay.
other than Netflix.
Yeah, I
because of the Korean
deactivated
dramas.
Twitter. I
needed to
kind of
do
went
that.
back on Twitter a little bit. It still sucks. So I'm going on a
not
social
good.
media diet. I'm reading books, older books. Okay.
Criterion, getting
I'm watching,
you're actually
yeah,
getting
I will
physical
watch
media.
stuff, but I'm watching stuff like I'm watching films.
You're
like
getting
old
physical
movies
media on
beginning
DVD
again.
players, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
bought some DVDs.
So talking about the physical media, right? So in the gamer space, a lot of people are like, don't ever get like just a digital only copy, right? Because you'll never own it.
Get a
a
disc.
physical
Get
copy,
the
right?
physical copy, yeah.
So Modern Warfare 2
Oh,
just
yeah.
came out,
Oh my god, yeah.
and the physical copy,
250 gigs or 150 gigs?
Like 70?
75 gigs are
Yeah.
on this, and that's not near the full size of the game, right?
Can you
It's
even
basic-
put that on a disc?
No, it's not even gigs. It's a 75 megabyte file. It's basically like the installer that will then connect to the internet to download
Yeah, it's
the.
just for authenticating.
So even if you buy the DVD or the Blu-ray
It's
or
still
whatever,
online.
it's still So it's like that, which is a waste. It's like, why even use the resources to print that? Just be like, here's the key to go and like download it on the, on the internet.
Yeah,
so-
like a thing where you can just kind of like own shit and control it and fix it.
And there's none of that. these
Like
days.
that's good. That era is going to be over. So
I mean,
can
you
still buy
literally
stuff
had to
like a
take,
card
like-
that you can fix on
yeah.
your own, and like that you don't need doesn't have like a fucking central computer that controls like basically every function. Get it and hold on to it for dear life.
Maybe this is an anecdote I can share that ties together a lot of these themes. So a friend of mine, I was talking about bassinets, a small bed you put your baby in
Yeah.
when they're an infant. A friend of mine bought this bassinet called the Snoo.
Okay.
Which is
I've kind of heard of
I've
that
got-
brand,
it's
right?
fi-
Is
it's
that a
fi-
brand?
Well, it's famous for being like the most expensive fucking bassinet. Okay, most
Okay.
bassinets are anywhere from like $50 to $100, maybe $200. This one's $2,000.
Wow.
What is it? Fucking raise your child for you? Like, what
Well,
does it do?
he has that complex now. He brought this up himself, but what it does is it has like a bunch of motions built into it that can like soothe your baby by moving the thing around, and it can
Baby
detect if your
centrifuge.
baby's awake or not, and like crying or not, and try to soothe it.
So it's an IoT thing? Is it an Internet of?
I don't
is
know.
it connected?
I'm sure it has an app, right? Because it has white noise it can play to soothe your baby as well.
Does it work?
Right.
The big question is, does it work?
Yeah.
Well, apparently people claim it works. Apparently it actually helps, and he said it's been helpful and so
Dude,
on.
if I
right?
spent
That actually
$2,000
sounds like it might be
But-
pretty cool.
but
It
he
can save you
says
some sleep.
he says like I do have
Maybe.
a complex about whether or not I am better at taking care of my kid and soothing my kid,
Or the
this,
computer.
like, robot.
The
bed
robot.
Robot's better.
is better at doing it.
Who
The
gives
robot
a shit?
doesn't need sleep. It's not tired. It can
Wait, why
sense
does
everything.
he have a complex about that?
He just does. He does. I don't know. He's a new dad.
Well, he
does.
bought it. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean,
He feels threatened by his snoo.
Well, I know it's kind of a joke, right? But he can't. That's what he said he did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope he's joking because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
He
But,
should just
you
be.
know-
I mean, if it works, he should just be thankful that he. That
Well, that's
it's
how
allowing him more sleep.
that's how people get, or that's why people are
That's why
spending
they're getting
$2,000
it, right?
in this fucking thing.
Yeah.
Because their kid is gonna like look great on social media with it because it gives them
Gets
an
some
extra
sleep,
hour or two
right?
of sleep, which is real. So
Yeah. Is that so?
guess
Is that
so,
like a?
I don't know, man.
One thing I never understood is like how come parents insist on putting the babies in like a different bedroom, like even from such a young age?
no, they're supposed to be in their guidance now is that they're supposed to be in the bed, like in the same room as you for like 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise,
because there
they-
used to be this thing where there were like the baby was always like so far away from the
No.
parents, and I'm like,
No, that is
why?
bad. Yeah, baby
Okay,
monitors,
okay.
people don't buy that shit anymore because like your phones can do it, and also they're supposed to be with you like 0 to 6 months because of SIDS.
Oh,
Sudden
yeah.
infant
Yeah.
death syndrome. Yeah.
It just seemed like a weird culture, like a weird thing.
Right,
That
it's like
insisted on the babies
you
being as far away from us as
Toughen them up
possible.
or something. Like,
New
why
guidance.
be?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. That sounds like the right
Yeah.
direction. Yeah.
Kids need to be physically close to their
Yep.
parents. I
100%.
just, yeah, and that weird phase where people are like, yeah, like they should be in a separate room and like don't coddle them too much when they're fucking like right out of the womb. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, they're babies.
Like, yeah,
Hey,
it just was very
question.
weird. I don't
One
know.
question for you, Philip. Do you expect to change a lot? Are you expecting the experience of having a kid to like fundamentally change you, or
Yeah.
do you think? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think it already has, right? Because
has
like I
it?
said, I take it very seriously. In part because I know, not my dad, but I know bad fathers, and I
Mm.
find them very repulsive. So for me, it's like a conviction to not be that.
Not fuck up like them.
So I guess what's one thing that you really want to avoid doing that maybe you experienced yourself growing up, or that you've observed people doing, and what's one thing you want to make sure you do from a positive standpoint? Not to put you on the spot, but just because I find that fascinating, because we've sort of like skirted around that. We've talked about that on this stream.
I think just having interest in your kid. I think a lot of
Okay.
dads, for some reason, I mean, a lot of it's like, societal, cultural, whatever, like, don't expect the dad to have as much interest in their kid. I really like kids. I think it's part of why we decided to have kids, because I actually really like kids.
Yeah.
I do well around them. Like, I have a niece and nephew I love, and I'm the favorite uncle. Like, it's a lot of fun to be the favorite uncle. So
true.
I think that would transfer over well. So I think that's one thing. I think a lot of dads don't, care about their kid as much as the mom maybe does, and
Okay.
probably do better in that point. Positive thing, I don't know, like try to raise a kid without spending too much money. I think back to this theme, right? But like I feel like
Yeah.
I had a lot of complexes growing up. Like with Plan A and stuff, right? Like a lot of it's about what we talk about here is about race. For me, it's half about race, half about class. Right, like all the stuff that we've talked about over the last 5-6 years, like and things that I've thought a lot about. It's not just about the race part, but a lot about the class part as well. And I think that has a big influence on how I think about like raising a child, for sure.
Yeah.
We grew
Well,
up poor, like it's just very different. And I went to
Yeah.
a school where there's a lot of rich kids, and it fucked me up for.
I think it's dude. I think it's great to
I
have
think
a
it's awesome.
father who knows what it's like to be poor.
Yeah.
I think it's great to have parents that know. Like, it would be great to not be poor, but have parents that understand it
Yeah,
and try to teach those lessons to an extent, rather than to be like, "Ooh, yeah, no, you don't want to know anything about that."
Right.
You should want to know something about that. Yeah, so that's good, man. I'm excited for you.
thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited, man. I think you're gonna be an amazing father. I really feel that way.
Oh yeah,
wish
you're
I-
like way better than most people. Trust me. I mean, it's like you're so far ahead of the game, man.
Yeah.
It's not even.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll revisit this topic as well in the future, because there's a lot of other things to say about it, right? Like, for instance, my kid's going to be half a kid, right? Asian,
That's true.
as
Yeah.
kids say today. And so there's a lot to talk about there as well. I have a lot of
Which
thoughts
is
about
not
that,
an
but
increasing, which is a very common and
yeah.
increasing.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why the phrase exists, right? 'Cause
They
it's-
won't. They shouldn't, especially in Toronto. They should not. That should not be a make them feel excluded or othered or anything. I hope.
No,
anyway.
but I have,
You would
I have
hope.
thoughts about it as a dad of such a kid, right? So,
Sure, yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah,
we'll talk about
yeah,
that at some other point.
That's a whole other stream. I mean, we're 2
Yeah.
hours in, and
But thanks for talking about it, dude. Because you're the only one
Yeah.
that's really.
Yeah, you're the only one.
The three of us are just these
Gang up
fucking,
on me.
grown-ass,
absolutely. I mean, and I want to
overgrown
thank
children here.
I want to thank the 8 people probably that have been on this listening to us for the whole time. And we've 8 to 11 people, and I love everyone with their comments, and
We'll put this out as a pod on the Escape from Planet.
Yeah.
It'll be a
And,
two-parter, I guess. It's 2 hours.
Cool.
Right. So I
I'm
don't
just
know
glad
if
to
we'll have
more
the
than
time to.
zero.
So we might not get the audio out today, but we'll definitely get it out tomorrow, and then we'll make it a 2-parter. The first part would be free, and then I think the second part we'll do on Patreon, or maybe we'll make both free. But the first part for sure will be free. You can always, this stream will be available on our Real Adoptee Words podcast. Or a YouTube channel, sorry. And we'll eventually also be putting these up as audio podcasts as well, because StreamYard is an amazing service, and we can get the video and audio and all that stuff and get that up there. So that's
there.
it.
Cool.
So
All right,
thanks,
guys.
everyone. Thanks,
Thanks
team.
for having us
Philip.
on your feed, man. Glad to see
Absolutely.
that you guys decided
Hey, thanks
to do
for joining.
something like this.
Very nice. Love the soundboard. Keep it up.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Hey.
We're gonna add more stuff to that. Oh man, I love the air horns. Honestly, I do.
Works every time.
Hype man
But,
over here. The hype man. Call the hype man.
I'm thinking that well, we'll decide obviously, Kana, what the next stream will be next week. But I know that on Escape from Plan A, you guys talked about the affirmative action Supreme Court case. We're not going to talk about that, but another really important case that's going to be up for oral arguments in front of the court is the case about the Indian Child Welfare Act, Brackeen versus Holland. Big repercussions for that particular case. Obviously, adoption is part of that. Native Indian, Native American tribal sovereignty. So lots to talk about with that. So we'll probably get into that as well. So yeah, thanks everybody.
That's all.
Thank you. Till next time.
Bye now.